climates. In the tropics, she creates trees which bear fruit and reproduce themselves. She forces the trees to adjust themselves to her scorching sun. She forces them to put out leaves suitable for protection against the rays of the sun. These same trees could not survive if removed to the Arctic regions, where nature has established an entirely different climate. In the colder climate, she creates trees which are adjusted to survive and to reproduce themselves, but they could not survive if transplanted in the tropical regions. In the same manner, nature clothes her animals, giving to those in each different climate a covering suited to their comfort and survival in that climate. In a similar manner, nature forces upon the minds of men the influences of their environment, which are stronger than the individual's own thoughts. Children are forced to take on the nature of all influences of those around them, unless their own thoughts are stronger than the influences. Nature sets up a definite rhythm for every environment, and everything within the range of that rhythm is forced to conform to it. Man alone has the power to establish his own rhythm of thought, providing he exercises this privilege before hypnotic rhythm has forced upon him the influences of his environment. Every home, every place of business, every town and village, and every street and community center has its own definite, discernible rhythm. If you wish to know what a difference there is in the rhythms of streets, take a walk up Fifth Avenue in New York, and then down a street in the slums. All forms of rhythm become permanent with time.
Does each individual have his own rhythm of thought?
Yes, that is precisely the major difference between individuals. The person who thinks in terms of power, success, opulence, sets up a rhythm which attracts these desirable possessions. The person who thinks in terms of misery, failure, defeat, discouragement, and poverty attracts these undesirable influences. This explains why both success and failure are the result of habit. Habit establishes one's rhythm of thought, and that rhythm attracts the object of one's dominating thoughts.
Hypnotic rhythm is something resembling a magnet which attracts things for which it has a magnetic affinity. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. That is why the poverty-stricken herd themselves into the same communities. It explains that old saying, misery loves company. It also explains why people who begin to succeed in any undertaking find that success multiplies with less effort as time goes on. All successful people use hypnotic rhythm, either consciously or unconsciously, by expecting and demanding success. The demand becomes a habit, hypnotic rhythm takes over the habit, and the law of harmonious attraction translates it into its physical equivalent.
In other words, if I know what I want from life, demand it, and back my demand by a willingness to pay life's price for what I want, and refuse to accept any substitutes, the law of hypnotic rhythm takes over my desire and helps, by natural and logical means, to transmute it into its physical counterpart. Is that true?
That describes the way the law works.
Science has established irrefutable evidence that people are what they are because of heredity and environment. They bring over with them at birth a combination of all the physical qualities of all their numberless ancestors. After they arrive here, they reach the age of self-consciousness, and from there on, they shape their own personalities and more or less fix their own earthly destinations as the result of the environmental influences to which they are subjected, especially the influences which control them during early childhood. These two facts have been so well established, there's no room for any intelligent person to question them. How can hypnotic rhythm change the nature of a physical body, which is a combination of thousands of ancestors who have lived and died before one is born? How can hypnotic rhythm change the influence of one's environment? People who are born in poverty and ignorance have a strong tendency to remain poverty-stricken and ignorant all through life. What, if anything, can hypnotic rhythm do about this?
Hypnotic rhythm cannot change the nature of the physical body one inherits at birth, but it can and it does modify change, control and make permanent one's environmental influences.
If I understand what you mean, a human being is forced by nature to take on and become a part of the environment he chooses, or the environment that may be forced upon him?
That is correct. But there are ways and means by which an individual may resist the influences of an environment he does not wish to accept, and also a method of procedure by which one may reverse the application of hypnotic rhythm from negative to positive ends.
Do you mean that there is a definite method by which hypnotic rhythm can be made to serve instead of destroy one?
I mean just that.
Tell me how this astounding end may be attained.
For my description to be of any practical value, it will be necessarily lengthy, because it will have to cover 7 principles of psychology which must be understood and applied by all who use hypnotic rhythm to aid them in forcing life to yield that which they want.
Then break your description into 7 parts, each giving a detailed analysis of one of the 7 principles with simple instructions for its practical application. Your Majesty will now proceed to unfold the secrets of the 7 principles through which human beings may force life to provide them with spiritual, mental, and physical freedom. Do not be sparing in your description of these principles. I want a complete illustration of how the principles may be used by anyone who chooses to use them. Tell us all you know about the principle of definiteness of purpose.
If you go through with this mad idea of publishing my confession, you will open the gates of hell and turn loose all the precious souls I have collected back down through the ages. You will deprive me of souls yet unborn. You will release from my bondage millions now living. Stop, I beg of you.
Open up. Let's hear what you have to say about the principle of definiteness of purpose.
You are pouring water on the fires of hell, but the responsibility is yours, not mine. I may as well tell you that any human being who can be definite in his aims and plans can make life hand over whatever is wanted.
That is a broad claim, Your Majesty. Do you wish to tone it down a bit?
Tone it down? No, I wish to tone it up. When you hear what I now have to say, you will understand why the principle of definiteness is so important. My opposition uses a clever little trick to cheat me of my control over people. The opposition knows that definiteness of purpose closes the door of one's mind so tightly against me that I cannot break through unless I can induce one to form the habit of drifting.
Why doesn't your opposition give your secret to all people by telling them to avoid you through definiteness of purpose? You've already admitted that 2 out of every 100 people belong to your opposition.
Because I am more clever than my opposition. I draw people away from definiteness with my promises. You see, I control more people than my opposition because I am a better salesman and a better showman. I attract people by feeding them liberally of the thought habits in which they like to indulge.
Is definiteness of purpose something with which one must be born, or may it be acquired?
Everyone, as I have told you before, is born with the privilege of being definite, but 98 out of every 100 people lose this privilege by set out. The privilege of definiteness can be maintained only by adopting it as a policy by which one is guided in all the affairs of life.
And hopefully they will get some service.
One takes advantage of the principle of definiteness, just as one may build a strong physical body, through constant, systematic use. Is that it?
You have stated the truth clearly and accurately.
Here's the Chelsea.
Now I think we are getting somewhere, Your Majesty. We have at long last found a starting point from which all who become self-determining in life must take off.
And it looks good in
We have discovered from your astounding confession that your greatest asset is man's lack of caution, which enables you to lead him into the jungle of indefiniteness through simple bribes. We have learned, beyond the question of doubt, that anyone who adopts definiteness of purpose as a policy and uses it in all of his daily experiences cannot be induced to form the habit of drifting.
Well, the tackle
Without the aid of the
has led to
drifting
a throw.
habit, you are powerless to attract people through promises. Is this correct?
I couldn't have stated the truth
It's
more
Johnny.
clearly myself.
Go ahead now, and describe how people neglect their privilege of being free and self-determining through indefiniteness and drifting.
I have
what a
already made
touch
brief
by the
reference to
defender.
this
He was
principle,
so quick
but I
to
will
get
now
into
go into
position
more
to get his
minute
body in the
details
way
as to how
there.
the principle works. I shall have to begin at the time of birth. When a child is born, it brings with it nothing but a physical body representing the evolutionary results of millions of years of ancestry. Its mind is a total blank. When the child
Petrone,
reaches the age of consciousness
away from
and
home,
begins
you
to
often see
recognize the
Chelsea
objects of its
produce some outstanding
surroundings, it
performances,
begins also
and
to
their
imitate
record actually
others.
on the road is
Imitation
best in this
is a
particular
habit.
league.
Naturally,
Home
the
teams
child
must dread
imitates, first of all,
welcoming
its
this
parents.
outfit after
Then it begins
gaining
to imitate its
15
other
wins in
relatives and
16
daily
games.
associates,
It's bound to
including
breed
its religious
an awful lot of
instructors and
confidence.
school teachers.
Okay.
The imitation extends not merely to physical expression, but also to thought expression. If a child's parents fear me and express that fear within range of the child's hearing, the child
showing
picks
how
up
he's
the
going to
fear
officiate
through the
this match.
habit of
It's gonna be a free
imitation
kick. He's not
and
gonna sound any
stores it away
nonsense.
as part of its subconscious stock of beliefs. If the child's
Petrone.
religious instructor expresses any form of fear of me,
Across comes Sergio
and they all
Ramos.
do in one form or another, That fear is added to the similar fear passed to the child by its parents, and the two forms of negative imitation are stored away in the
Kept his
subconscious
concentration,
mind
the goalkeeper,
to be drawn
and
upon
because of
and
that,
used
kept
by
hold of
you
the ball.
later in
He
life.
seems to fill the goal. This
In a
lad is
similar
quite
way,
an
the
imposing
child
keeper.
learns by imitation to limit its power of
Kila
thought
Vogi.
by filling its mind with envy, hatred, greed,
Ruben Neves.
lust, revenge, and all the other negative
Bonaventura.
impulses of thought
Good
which
support
destroy
running
all
on either side.
possibility of definiteness. Meanwhile, I move in and induce the child to drift until I bind its mind through hypnotic
Quick-witted
rhythm.
and quick.
Am
His
I to
movement
understand
to
from your
intercept there.
remarks that you have to gain control of people while they are very
Johnny.
young, or lose your opportunity
Now
at
he
them
wants to take them
altogether?
on.
I prefer to claim them before they come into possession of their own minds. Once any person
Not a
learns the
productive
power of
cross
his own
this time.
thoughts, he becomes
Cross dealt
positive
with by
and
the
difficult
defender.
to subdue.
Alan
As a
McInally
matter of
has
fact,
news of
I
a
cannot
goal
control
at
any
Leicester
human
City.
being who
It's a
discovers
goal
and
for
uses the
Manchester
principle of
City.
definiteness.
15 minutes played,
Is
1-0.
the habit of definiteness a
Bonaventura.
permanent protection
He's put his
against
body
your
on the line
control?
there.
No, not by any means. Definiteness closes the door of one's mind to me only as long as that person follows the principle
goes
as
the
a matter
corner.
of policy.
Keeper choosing to
Once any
punch
person
the ball rather
hesitates,
than catch it.
procrastinates, or becomes indefinite about anything, he is just one step removed from my control.
What has definiteness to do with one's material circumstances? I want to know if one may acquire power through definiteness of purpose
by
without
the
inviting
goalkeeper.
destruction through the law of compensation.
Your question limits my illustrations because there are so few people in the world who understand, and there have been so few in the past who understood, how to use definiteness of purpose without attracting to themselves the negative application of the law
Let's
of
hear from Alan
compensation.
McInally, who's got a penalty
Here
to
you
tell
are
us about
forcing me
at
to
Anfield.
disclose one of my
It's
most
a penalty
prized
for
tricks.
Liverpool.
I am bound to tell you
Slight
that I
delay,
eventually
so ref
reclaim
clears
for
the
my
defenders.
cause all who escape me temporarily through
Up he
definiteness of
steps.
purpose.
Oh,
The
deep
reclamation
past
is
the
made by
goalkeeper.
filling the mind
Brilliant
with
penalty.
greed
18
for
minutes
power
played,
and the
1-0.
love of egotistical
Interesting news
expression,
again from
until
Alan
the
McInally.
individual
Thanks, Alan.
falls into the habit of violating the rights of others.
Moussa Dembele.
Then I step in with the law of compensation
Conte.
and reclaim.
So I see from your
Could have been a
admission
decent
that
pass.
definiteness of
Interception
purpose
absolutely
may be
crucial as it
dangerous
turned
in
out.
proportion to its
Very
possibility
quickly when they
as a
get
power.
possession.
Is that true?
Yes. And what is more important,
It's a big game
every
involving
principle
Manchester
of
City. Alan
good
McInally
carries
is
with it
reporting
the
on it for us.
seed
I'm
of
sorry I had to cut him
equivalent
short.
danger.
The score is
That
now
is hard
1-0.
to believe. What danger, for example, can there be in the habit of
decisive,
love of
but
truth?
not in the end
The
deadly.
danger lies in the
So
word,
much pace,
habit.
cutting edge,
All
just lacking
habits,
there.
save only that of the love of definiteness of purpose, may lead to the habit of drifting. Love for truth, unless it assumes the proportion of definite pursuit of truth, may become similar to all other good intentions. You know, of course, what I do with good intentions.
Is love for one's relatives also dangerous?
Wally.
The love for anything or anyone,
They've got a man
save
out
only
wide.
the love of definiteness of purpose, may become dangerous. Love is a state of mind which beclouds reason, saps willpower, and blinds one to facts and truth. Everyone who becomes self-determining and
Joao
gains
Cancelo.
spiritual freedom to think his own
Difficult
thoughts
for the
must
defender
examine
against the player who
carefully
wants to take
every
him on
emotion
like
that
this.
seems even remotely related to love.
Strong, powerful
You may be
clearance.
surprised to know that love is one of my most effective faiths. With it, I
Room in
lead
which to
into the
attack.
habit of drifting those whom I could attract with nothing else.
Those are the kind of
That is
stats you
why
want
I
to see.
have placed it at the
Wolves,
head of my list of
they've got their
brides.
foot on the gas.
Show
Last
me what
15
any
minutes.
person loves
It's been
most, and
impressive.
I will have my
Can put
clues
them
on
in
how that
front
person
here.
can be induced to
He's
drift
done just that.
until I
Oh,
bind
they've
him
laid
with
down a mark
hypnotic
with that goal. Really good
Love
finish.
and fear combine to give me the most effective
Wolverhampton
weapons
Wanderers
with which
have
I
this
induce
lead.
people to drift. One is as helpful to me as the other. Both have the effect of causing people to neglect to develop definiteness in the use of their own minds. Give me control over a person's fears and
Good
tell me
support
what he
running
loves
on either
most,
side.
and we may as well mark that
Mateo
person down
Kovacic.
as my slave. Both love and fear are emotional
Kovacic.
forces of such stupendous potency that either
last
may
line of
completely
defense,
set aside the
but
power
how
of
strong
will
he was.
and the power of reason. Without will
It's
and
Johnny.
reason, there is nothing left to support definiteness of purpose.
But, Your Majesty,
They're
life
Donker.
would not be worth living if people
he wants
never
to take
felt
them
the
on.
emotion of love.
No way through for
You're
the shot.
right as far as your reasoning goes, but you neglected to
Conte.
add that love should be under one's definite control at all times. Of course, love is a
Chance to get
desirable
forward
state of
from the
mind,
wing.
but it also is a palliative, which may be used to limit or destroy reason and
It's Johnny.
willpower. both of which rate above love in importance to human beings who want
Petrone.
freedom and
And a
self-determination.
turnover in play
I
here with that
understand from
interception.
what you say that people who gain power must harden their emotions, master
They
fear,
spread it
and
out wide
subdue
here.
love.
Chance
Is
to
that
get
correct?
some width into
People
this
who
attack.
gain and maintain
sometimes you
power
just have
must
to clear it
become
like that.
definite in all
Safety
their
first.
thoughts and all their deeds. If that is
Mateo
what you
Kovacic.
call hard, then they must become hard.
Let us look into the sources of
Kovacic.
advantage of definiteness in
That's
the
how to
everyday
attack.
affairs of life.
Well, suddenly they could
Which
be
is
on the
more apt to
counter-attack.
succeed? A weak plan applied with definiteness, or a
Looks
sound,
set
strong
up for the
plan
counter-attack,
indefinitely
but
applied?
in the end they didn't
Weak
play it
plans
right.
have a way of becoming strong if definitely applied.
You
Across
mean
comes
that
Sergio
any plan
Ramos.
definitely put into continuous action in pursuit of a definite purpose may be successful,
Chelsea
even if it is not
chasing
the
an
best
equaliser
plan.
here.
Yes, I mean
They
just
might have that in them.
Well, I think they've
Definiteness
got
of
to get
purpose
better.
plus definiteness
Maybe a
of
few stern
plan
words
by
from
which
the
the
gaffer
purpose
at
is to be
half-time will do the
achieved
trick.
generally
A
succeeds.
little too
no
eager
matter
to get
how
in
weak
behind the
plan may
opposition,
be.
caught offside.
The major difference between a sound and an unsound plan is that the sound plan, if definitely applied, may be carried out more quickly than an unsound plan.
In other words, if
Contact.
one cannot be always right, one can and
looking
should
good
be
when they
always
attack.
definite. Is that what you were trying to get across to me?
That is the idea.
Kovacic
People
probing
who
away,
are definite
working
in
away
both
at the
their plans
opposition with these
and their
passes.
purposes never accept temporary
Kovacic.
defeat as being more than an urge to greater effort.
And the
You can see for
goalkeeper
yourself
done well
that
to
this
stop
sort
that
of
one.
policy is bound to
Safety
win if
first
it is
from the
followed
defender,
with
can't blame
definiteness.
him for that.
Can a person who moves with definiteness of both plan and purpose
He saw the
be
look
always
from the
sure
other
of
player and
success?
saw where the
No.
pass was going.
The best of
Read it.
plans sometimes
Won the
misfire.
ball
But
capably
the
with that
person who
tackle.
moves with definiteness recognizes the difference between temporary defeat and failure. When plans fail,
Saw
he
the direction of
substitutes
the
others,
pass.
but he does not change his purpose. He perseveres. Eventually, he finds a plan that
Joao
succeeds.
Cancelo.
Will a plan based upon
a look at
immoral
what's
or
on now from this
unjust
wide
ends
position, not closed
succeed
down.
as quickly as one
Referees
motivated by a
indicated
keen
there will
sense
be a
of
minimum
justice and
of
morality?
2 minutes.
Through the
Kovacic!
operation of the law of
Well, it
compensation,
was a bit desperate,
everyone reaps
but
that
what
which
a
he
good
sows.
challenge.
Plans based on
Okay.
unjust or immoral motives may bring temporary
nonsense
success,
defending, it was
but
needed.
enduring success must take into consideration the fourth dimension, time.
And that's half-time.
Time is the
Signaled by the
enemy of
referee.
immorality and
1-0.
injustice. It is the friend of justice and morality. Failure to recognize this fact has been responsible for the crime wave among the youths of the world. The youthful, inexperienced mind is apt to mistake temporary success for permanency. The youth often
Here
makes the
comes the
mistake
second
of
half,
coveting
started
the
by
temporary
Chelsea.
gains of immoral, unjust plans, but neglects to look ahead and observe the penalties which follow as definitely as night follows
Conte.
day.
Kovacic.
This is pretty deep stuff, Your Majesty.
pass not
Let us get back to the
completed, really.
discussion of lighter
chance
and more
to
concrete
break away now on the
subjects
counter.
that are likely to interest the majority of people. I'm
Petrone.
interested in discussing the things that
Bonaventura.
make people happy and miserable,
Good
rich and
interception.
poor, sick and healthy.
Goalkeeper.
In brief, I'm
slams it
interested in
upfield.
everything that can be used by human beings
We
to
can go
make
over now
life
to
pay
Alan McInally.
satisfactory
There's been a
dividends
goal at
in
Anfield.
return for the
It's the
effort that
second
one
goal
puts
for
into the
Liverpool.
business of living.
48 minutes
Very
played.
well.
2-0.
Let us
Great to
begin.
have Alan
You
McInally
have
out
my
and about
idea.
for us.
Your Majesty has a
Right up
tendency
date
to
again
stray
there.
off into abstract details,
Comes
which
in with
most
a tackle.
people can neither understand nor use in the solution of their problems. Could
Well, coming
that,
up for
by
you on
any
EA
chance,
Sports,
be a
the
definite
next
plan
Premier
of
League
yours to
fixture
answer my
for the
questions
hosts.
with indefinite answers? If that is your plan,
Bit of space
it
to
is
go
a
forward
slick
into
trick,
with the ball.
but it will not work. Go ahead now, and tell me
What
something
about
more of
Chelsea's
the
next game?
miseries and failures of human beings growing
They're playing
directly
Manchester
out of
City in the next
indefiniteness.
match.
Why
Champions
not
League
permit me to tell you
semi-final,
more of
first
the
leg.
pleasures and
Excellent vision.
successes of people who
Keeper's
understand
done
and
very well
apply the
here.
principle of definiteness?
I observe that sometimes people with definiteness of plan and purpose get what they ask from life, only to find
Set
after
up
they
to
get it
play on
that
the
they
break
do not
now.
want it. What then?
There's one-on-one with the
Generally,
goalkeeper.
one can get rid of whatever is not wanted by application of the same principle of definiteness with which the thing was acquired. A life that is lived with fullness of peace of mind, contentment, and happiness always divests itself of everything it does not want. Anyone who submits to
Well, it's the
annoyance by
understanding
things
you've
he
got
does
to
not
admire
want
here,
is
Martin.
not
The
definite.
lad getting
He
on
is
to
a
the
drifter.
end of it. The boys
What
seeing
about
the pass
married people
quickly.
who cease to want each other?
Well, it's
Should
a
they
goal
separate?
worth replaying
Or is it
over
true
and
that
over
all
again, isn't it?
marriages are made in heaven, and the contracting parties are, therefore, forever bound by their bargain,
Every
even though it
manager
may
wants
prove
to
to be
see
a poor
his
one
team
for both?
have bounce back ability,
First,
as
let
we
me
say.
correct that
He's
old
just seen
saying
that
that
from his
all
players.
marriages are made in heaven. I know of
It's,
some which were made
level.
on my side.
Both sides have scored here now.
Minds which do
17,
not
Marcel
harmonize should never
Kovacic.
be forced to remain together in marriage or any other relationship. Friction and all forms of discord between minds lead inevitably to the habit of drifting, and of course to indefiniteness.
Aren't people sometimes bound to others by a relationship of duty, which renders it impractical
very
for
good
them to take
interception.
from life what they want most?
Duty is one of the most abused and misunderstood words in existence. The first
Taking
duty
on
of
the
every human
defenders.
being is to
No
himself.
support really.
Every
Up with
person
the
owes
deliver of the
himself the
cross.
duty of
It's a
finding
wasted
how to
ball
live a
into the
full and
box.
happy life. Beyond this, if one has time and energy, not needed in the fulfillment
Here's
of his own
Alexandro.
desires, one may assume responsibility for helping others.
Isn't that a selfish
Kovacic.
attitude? And isn't selfishness
Well, it
one
was
of the
the final
causes
ball
of
to set up
failure
the
to find
chance. And
happiness?
it would have
I
been
stand
but for
by
the
my
interception.
statement that there is no higher
News of
duty
a
than
goal
that which
at
one owes
Liverpool, Alan
himself.
McInally.
Doesn't a child owe something in the way of duty to its parents who gave it life and
Thanks, Alan.
sustenance during its periods of helplessness?
Well, the game can be influenced so often by
Not
substitutes.
at
The
all.
home team
It is just the
going
other way
to
around.
gamble on that working
Parents
for
owe
them now.
their children everything they can
Into
give
the
them in the
attacking
way of
third.
knowledge. Beyond that,
Kovacic.
parents often spoil instead of helping
What an
their
important
offspring by a
interception
false
that
sense of
was.
duty, which prompts them to indulge their children instead of
out
forcing
for
them
the
to
throw.
seek and gain knowledge at first hand.
I see
Time
what
for
you
some
mean.
fresh legs
Your
here.
theory is that too much help thrust upon
It's
the youth
Johnny.
encourages him to drift and become indefinite in all things.
It's Ruben
You
Neves.
believe that necessity is a teacher of great sagacity,
Read
that
the
defeat
intentions.
carries with it an equivalent virtue, that unearned gifts of
Referee
every nature may
allowing
become a
Chelsea
curse
to play on here
instead of a
despite the
blessing.
foul on the
Is that
Chelsea man.
correct?
You have stated my philosophy
Well read,
perfectly.
timely
My
defending.
belief is not theory, it is fact.
Then you do not advocate prayer as a means of gaining desirable ends.
Dendoncker.
On the contrary, I do advocate prayer, but not the sort of prayer that consists of empty,
Now they've got the ball,
begging,
what are they gonna
meaningless
do with it?
words. The sort of prayer against which I am helpless
Throw it.
is the prayer of definiteness of
Well, he's
purpose.
going to show the yellow
I never
card. That's
thought
good
of
refereeing to
definiteness
go
of
back
purpose
to the
as being
original
a
offence,
prayer.
having played the
How
advantage.
can it be?
Yeah, you always felt that he
Definiteness
would.
is in
It wasn't
effect
the
the
best of
only
challenges,
sort
that.
of prayer upon which one can rely. It places one in the way of using hypnotic rhythm to attain definite ends by the mere act of
Alexandro.
appropriating it
Now
from the
Bailey.
great universal storehouse of infinite intelligence. The appropriation, in case you are interested, takes place through definiteness
And
of
they've
purpose
spread it out wide
persistently
here.
pursued.
Why do the majority of prayers fail?
Chelsea coming on
They don't.
strong again as
All
they look to
prayers
get
bring back
the
the
go-ahead
original
goal.
prayers.
But you just said that definiteness of purpose is the
That's
only sort of
amazing
prayer
defending.
upon which one can
That's what
rely.
defenders are for when
Now
the
you say
goalkeeper's
that
beaten
all
and he
prayers
was
bring
there.
results. What do you mean?
Oh, it's been a
There
cracker,
is
Martin,
nothing
hasn't it?
inconsistent
Possession
about it.
fairly
The
equal,
majority of
as
people
has
who
this
pray go to
contest.
prayer only
Some
after
great
everything
goals,
else
some great
fails them.
football being played out there.
Naturally, they go with their
and,
minds
it seems
filled
to be
with fear
continuing
that the
in the
prayers will
same
not
vein.
be answered.
I don't know whether the
Well, their
managers
fears are realized.
can put them in front
The person
here.
who goes to prayer with definiteness of purpose and faith in the attainment of that
Sandro.
purpose puts into motion the laws of
It's good
nature,
play, this.
which transmute
The opposition
one's
can't get
dominating
at them when they're
desires into
keeping
their
the ball.
physical equivalent. That is all there
Conte.
is to prayer. One form of prayer is negative and brings only negative results. One form is positive and
It's
brings
offside.
definite
That's
positive results. Could anything be more simple? People who whine and beg God to assume responsibility for all their troubles and provide them with all the necessities and luxuries of life are too lazy to create what they want and translate it into existence through the power of their own minds. When you hear a person praying for something that he should procure through his own efforts, you may be sure you are listening to a drifter. Infinite intelligence favors only those who understand and adapt themselves to her laws. She makes no discrimination because of fine character or pleasing personality. These things help people negotiate their way through
The
life
assistant
more
has said,
harmoniously
Well,
with one
when he
another.
looks back on that,
But
I
the
think he
source
might be a
from
bit
which prayer is
disappointed
answered is not
because the
impressed by
striker
fine
seemed to
feathers.
time his run really
Nature's
well.
law is, know what you want,
That's a
adapt
great
yourself to
interception.
my laws, and you shall have it.
Does that harmonize with the teachings of Christ?
Delaney.
Perfectly. Also, it
Going forward
harmonizes
with
with the
real
teachings of
purpose
all
now.
truly great philosophers.
Delaney.
Is your theory of definiteness in
Kovacic.
harmony with the philosophy of
Morata.
man of
Pushed
science?
out by the goalkeeper, but only into a
Definiteness is the
dangerous
major
area.
difference between a
No
scientist
nonsense
and a
defending
drifter.
from him.
Through the principle of definiteness of
Alexandro.
purpose and plan, the
Delaney.
scientist forces
Conte.
nature to hand over her most profound secrets. It was through this principle that Edison uncovered the secret of
Alexandro.
the talking machine,
Delaney.
the incandescent electric light,
Conte.
and scores of other benefits for mankind.
Alvaro Morata.
Then I understand that definiteness
Conte.
is the first requisite for success
Good
in
football.
all
Oh, the
earthly
lead is here
undertakings.
for the
Is that
taking.
right?
Exactly.
Well, it was a bit
Anything
desperate.
which teaches
But
people
what a
to
good
examine
challenge.
facts and coordinate them
Maybe
into
the
definite
counter-attack is
plans
on
through
here.
accurate thinking is hard on my profession.
We've got 10 minutes
If
left
this
on the clock.
thirst for definite knowledge now
Conte.
spreading over the world keeps
Kovacic.
up, my business will be shot to pieces
And
within
the
next
situation might
century.
suit Kovacic with
I
the ball at his
thrive
feet.
on ignorance, superstition, intolerance, and fear. But I cannot stand up under definite knowledge properly organized into definite plans in the minds of people who think for
Oh,
themselves.
it's offside. And it
Why
looks as
don't you
though
take over
they might be in to
omnipotence
score.
and manage the whole works in your own
Action on
way?
the benches.
You might as well
Both
ask why
teams
the
are gonna make a
negative portion of the
substitution.
electron doesn't take over the positive portion and run the entire works.
Delaney.
The answer is that both the positive
Kovacic.
and the negative charges of energy are necessary to the
Koke.
existence of the electron.
Oh, they
One
thought
is
they were in
balanced
for the winner
equally
there
against
until
the
that
other.
marvellous
Stalemated,
interception.
as it were. So it is with what you call omnipotence
Morata.
and I. We represent the
Put his foot in
positive
to
and
cut
the
out the
negative
pass.
forces of the entire
84
system
minutes
of
gone,
universes,
6 minutes to
and we
go.
are equally balanced one against the other. If this power of
Looped over the
balance were
defenders.
shifted the
For the forward to
slightest degree,
chase.
the whole
Put in from
system
the
of
wide area.
universes would become quickly reduced to a
Proper
mass of
clearance.
inert matter.
Well away from the danger
Now
zone.
you know why I cannot take over the whole show and
Delaney.
run it my way.
If what you say is
On the
true,
move
you
and
have
able to cut out
exactly
the
the same
pass.
power as omnipotence. Is that
Threads
true?
it through.
That is correct.
Now, just to
My
keep it a
opposition,
beat.
you
The
call
match-winning
omnipotence,
moment, it seems.
expresses
But in the
itself
end, it
through
was
the forces which you call good, the positive forces of nature. I express myself through the forces you call bad, the negative forces. Both good and bad are coincidental with existence. One is as important as the other.
Then the doctrine of predestination is sound.
Match-saving
People are
moment
born
from
to
the
success or
goalkeeper.
failure,
no
misery
wonder
or
his
happiness,
teammates are
to be good or
thanking him.
bad,
That should
and
have
they
been
have
the
nothing to
winner,
do with this, nor can they modify their natures. Is that
Emphatically not. Every human being has a wide range of choice in
Well, they
both
would
his
have gone
thoughts
behind
and
here,
his
but for
deeds.
this excellent
Every human
goalkeeper.
being
Yeah,
can
he
use
could
his
have got a lot
brain
worse
for the
there.
reception
Shouldn't
and
have
the
been for him.
expression of positive thoughts, or he can use it for the expression of
Worked so
negative
hard on
thoughts.
his heading.
His
He should
choice
have
in
known
this
what to
important
think.
matter shapes his
Keeper's
entire
waving
life.
that one bye-bye.
From what you have said, I gather the idea that human beings have more freedom of expression than either you or your opposition. Is that correct?
That is true. Omnipotence and I are bound by immutable laws of nature. We cannot express ourselves in any manner not conforming to
A
these
real
laws.
charge on
Then
from
it is
Chelsea.
true that
One
man has
goal now,
rights and
surely they win
privileges
it.
not available to either omnipotence or the devil.
around the
Is that the
crowd
truth?
for a 3-minute
Yes,
add-on.
that is
What we're
true.
going to get for added
But you
time.
might well have
Trying to catch
added that
the
man
other
has
team
not
out
yet
with a
fully
quick break
awakened to
here.
the realization of this potential power. Man
Now
still
it's
regards
Ali.
himself as something resembling a
One-on-one with
worm
the goalkeeper.
In
We knew about the
reality, he
pace.
has more power
It was
than all
too
other
quick
living
for the
things
opposition.
combined.
Great goal.
Definiteness of purpose seems to be a panacea for all evils of man.
Not
to counter it.
Oh, this is
But you may be
incredible. They've
sure
surely
no one
won the
ever will
match
become
with this goal.
self-determined.
The last kick
Why
of the
are
match.
children
Well,
taught
it's
definiteness
great
of
for the
purpose in
striker,
the
just when
public
the
schools?
pressure's on, when
For the
it's
reason
begging
that
out for
there is
somebody
no
to make
definite
themselves a
plan
hero.
or
He's
purpose
done that.
behind any of this school.
Well, a very exciting climax.
Children
now.
are sent to school to make
Final
credits
whistle.
and to learn how to memorize, not to learn what
Is
they
it a
want.
case of back to the drawing board after a
What
defeat
good
like
is a
this?
school
I think there
credit
were
if one
positives
cannot
to
convert
take
it
out
into
of
the
it,
material
but,
and spiritual
Set
needs
up
of life?
to play on the
I
break
am
now.
only a devil, not an unwinder of riddles.
I deduce from all you say that neither the schools nor the churches prepare the youths of the world with a practical working knowledge of their own minds. Is anything of more importance to a human being than an understanding of the forces and circumstances which influence his own mind?
The only thing of enduring value to any human being is a working knowledge of his own mind. The churches do not permit a person to inquire into the possibilities of his own mind, and the schools do not recognize that such a thing as a mind exists.
Aren't you a little hard on the schools and the churches?
No, I am merely describing them as they are, without bias or prejudice.
Aren't the schools and the churches your bitter enemies?
Their leaders may think they are, but I am impressed only by facts. The truth is this, if you must know it. The churches are my most helpful allies, and the schools run the churches a close second.
On what specific or general grounds do you make this claim?
On the grounds that both the churches and the schools help me to convert people to the habit of drifting.
Do you realize that your charge is substantially a sweeping indictment of the two institutions of major importance which have been responsible for civilization in its present form?
Do I realize it? Man alive, I gloat over it. If the schools and churches had taught people how to think for themselves, where would I be now?
This confession of yours will disillusion millions of people whose only hope for salvation is in their churches. Isn't that a cruel thing to do to them? Wouldn't most people be better off living in the bliss of ignorance than to know the truth about you?
What do you mean by the term salvation? From what are people being saved? The only form of enduring salvation that is worth a green fig to any human being is that which comes from recognition of the power of his own mind. Ignorance and fear are the only enemies from which men need salvation.
You seem to hold nothing sacred.
You are wrong. I hold sacred the one thing which is my master, the one thing I fear.
What is that?
The power of independent thought backed by definiteness of purpose.
Then you do not have many people to fear.
Only 2 out of every 100, to be exact. I control all others.
Let's give the churches a rest and get back to the public schools. Your confession has shown clearly that you thrive and perpetuate yourself from one generation to another by the clever trick of taking over the minds of children before they have the chance to learn how to use their minds. I wish to know what is wrong with a public school system that permits the devil to control so many people. I wish to know also what can be done to the established system of teaching that will ensure all children the opportunity to learn, first, that they have minds, and second, how to use those minds to bring spiritual and economic freedom. I am putting the question to you definitely enough, and since you have stressed the importance of definiteness of purpose, I am here and now putting you on notice that your answer to my question must be definite.
Wait a moment while I catch my breath. You have given me quite an order. It seems strange that you would come to the devil to learn how to live. I should think you would go to my opposition. Why don't you?
Your Majesty, it is you who are on trial here, not I. I want the truth, and I am not particular as to the source from which I get it. There is something radically wrong with the system of education that has given us a balance sheet with life that shows us hopelessly in the red and groping for the road to self-determination as if we were so many animals lost in the jungle. I want to know 2 things about this system. First, what is the major weakness of the system? Second, how can this weakness be eliminated? The floor is yours again. Please, stick to the question and stop trying to decoy me into the discussion of deep abstract subjects. That's definite, is it not?
You leave me no choice but that of direct answer. To begin with, the public school system approaches the subject of education from the wrong angle. The school system endeavors to teach children to memorize facts, instead of teaching them how to use their own minds.
Is that all that is wrong with the system?
Oh no, that is only the beginning. Another major weakness of the school system is that it does not establish in the minds of children either the importance of definiteness of purpose, or make any attempt to teach youths how to be definite about anything. The major object of all schooling is to force the students to cram their memories with facts, instead of teaching them how to organize and make practical use of facts. This cramming system centers the attention of students on the accumulation of credits, but overlooks the important question of how to use knowledge in the practical affairs of life. This system turns out graduates whose names are inscribed upon parchment certificates, but whose minds are empty of self-determination. The school system got off to a bad start at the beginning. The schools began as institutions of higher learning, operated entirely for the select few whose wealth and family entitled them to education. Thus, the entire school system was evolved by beginning at the top and working back down to the bottom. It is no wonder the system neglects to teach children the importance of definiteness of purpose, when the system itself has literally evolved through indefiniteness.
What would correct this weakness of the public school system? Let's not complain of the weakness of the system unless we are prepared to offer a practical remedy with which it can be corrected. In other words, while we are discussing the importance of definiteness of plan and purpose, let us take our own medicine and be definite.
Why don't you lay off the schools and churches and save yourself plenty of trouble? Don't you know that you are poking your nose into the affairs of the 2 forces that control the world? Suppose you do show up the schools and the churches as being weak and inadequate for the needs of human beings. What then? With what are you going to replace these 2 institutions?
Stop trying to evade my questions by the old trick of asking a counter-question. I do not propose to replace the schools and churches, but I do propose to find out, if I can, how these organized forces can be modified so that they will serve people instead of keeping them in ignorance. Go ahead now and give me a detailed catalog of all the changes in the public school system which would improve it.
So you want the entire catalog, do you? Do you
Thank
want
you
the
everyone for your
suggested
patience,
changes
and
in
we'll
the
start taking
order
some
of their
questions now.
importance?
Describe the changes needed, just as they come to you.
You are forcing me to commit an act of treason against myself. But here it is. Reverse the present system by giving children the privilege of leading in their schoolwork instead of following orthodox rules designed only to impart abstract knowledge. Let instructors serve as students, and let the students serve as instructors. As far as possible, organize all schoolwork into definite methods through which the student can learn by doing, and direct the classwork so that every student engages in some form of practical labor connected with the daily problems of life. Ideas are the beginning of all human achievement. Teach all students how to recognize practical ideas that may be of benefit in helping them acquire whatever they demand of life. Teach the students how to budget and use time. And above all, teach the truth that time is the greatest asset available to human beings, and the cheapest. Teach the student the basic motives by which all people are influenced, and show how to use these motives in acquiring the necessities and the luxuries of life. Teach children what to eat, how much to eat, and what is the relationship between proper eating and sound health. Teach children the true nature and function of the emotion of sex. And above all, teach them that it can be transmuted into a driving force capable of lifting one to great heights of achievement. Teach children to be definite in all things, beginning with the choice of a definite major purpose in life. Teach children the nature of and possibilities for good and evil in the principle of habit, using as illustrations with which to dramatize the subject the everyday experiences of children and adults. Teach children how habits become fixed through the laws of hypnotic rhythm, and influence them to adopt, while in the lower grades, habits that will lead to independent thought. Teach children the difference between temporary defeat and failure, and show them how to search for the seed of an equivalent advantage which comes with every circumstance of defeat. Teach children to express their own thoughts fearlessly, and to accept or reject at will all ideas of others, reserving to themselves always the privilege of relying upon their own judgment. Teach children to reach decisions promptly, and to change them, if at all, slowly and with reluctance, and never without a definite reason. Teach children that the human brain is the instrument with which one receives from the great storehouse of nature the energy which is specialized into definite thoughts, that the brain does not think, but serves as an instrument for the interpretation of stimuli which cause thought. Teach children the value of harmony in their own minds, and that this is attainable only through self-control. Teach children the nature and the value of self-control. Teach children that there is a law of increasing returns, which can be and should be put into operation as a matter of habit, by rendering always more service and better service than is expected of them. Teach children the true nature of the Golden Rule, and above all show them that through the operation of this principle, everything they do to and for another, they also do to and for themselves. Teach children not to have opinions unless they are formed from facts, or beliefs which may reasonably be accepted as facts. Teach children that cigarettes, liquor,
This
narcotics,
is when
and
it really gets
overindulgence in
tense. Only
sex
4
destroy
teams
the
remain
power
in the
of
biggest
will
club
and
competition
lead to
in the
the habit of
world,
drifting.
and we're not far
Do
away
not
from
forbid
kick-off
these
in the
evils,
first leg.
just expel
It
them.
is Chelsea. They
Teach
face
children the
Manchester
danger of
City,
believing
and it's
anything
live
merely
right
because their
here
parents,
on
religious
EA
instructors,
TV.
or someone else says it is so. Teach children to face facts, whether they are pleasant
A
or
warm welcome.
unpleasant,
Blue is the
without
colour.
resorting to
Football
subterfuge
is the
or
game, as the old
analysis.
song used to go. We're
Teach
here
children
at
to encourage
Stamford
the
Bridge
use of their
tonight in
sixth
West
sense,
London.
through which
My name
ideas
is Derek
present
Ray,
themselves in
and
their
with me in
minds
the
from
commentary
unknown
position
sources,
is the
and
former
to
Arsenal
examine
fullback
all
Lee
such
Dixon.
ideas.
And tonight we've got the semi-final
Teach
of the
children the
Champions
full
League
import
coming
of
up
the
for
law
you.
of
It
compensation
is
as it
Chelsea
was interpreted by
facing
Ralph
Manchester
Waldo
City.
and show them
thanks,
how
Derek.
the law
I'm
works in the
so
small
excited
everyday
for the
affairs
players.
of
I
life.
really am. I love playing in
Teach children
semi-finals.
that
Didn't play in the
definite
Champions
purpose,
League
backed by
semi-final, mind.
definite plans,
You find out
persistently
about
and
yourself in a
continuously.
semi-final. Can
It's
you
the most
control your
efficacious
emotions?
form of prayer
Can you
available
commit to the
human
game
beings.
plan? We're just about to
Teach
find out.
children that
Very,
the space they
very
occupy
exciting.
in the world is measured definitely by the quality and quantity of useful service they render the world. Teach children there is no problem which does not have an appropriate solution. and that the solution often may be found in the circumstance creating the problem. Teach children that their only real limitations are those which they set up or permit others to establish in their own minds. Teach them that man can achieve whatever man can conceive and believe. Teach children that all schoolhouses and all textbooks are elementary infants, which may be helpful in the development of their minds, but that the only school of real value is the great University of Life, wherein one has the privilege of learning from experience. Teach children to be true to themselves at all times, and since they cannot please everyone, therefore to do a good job of pleasing themselves.
That is an imposing list, but it seems conspicuous by the fact it ignores practically every subject now taught in the public schools. Is that intended?
You asked for a list of suggested changes in public school curricula which would benefit children. Well, that is
Progress to
what
this
you
point in the competition.
Some of the changes you suggest are so unorthodox, they would shock most of the educators of today, wouldn't they?
Most of the
Here's the
educators of today.
Manchester City lineup.
A good sound
I'm
shock
saying
often
they have
helps
an
the brain that has
unconditional
been
commitment to
atrophied by
ball
habit.
possession. Should
With
we
the changes
expect
you
more of
suggest
that
for
in
the
this
public
game, Lee?
schools
Yeah,
give
absolutely,
children
Derek. They're a
immunity
team
against
that
the
loves
habit
that
of drifting.
ball. It's like
Yes,
gold to them.
that is one
You
of
have
the
to be
results
patient
the
when you're
changes
playing
will
against
bring.
that
But
style
there
of
are
play.
others too.
Dive in too early and it could be disaster.
How could the suggested changes be forced into the public school system? You know, of course, it is as difficult to get a new idea into an educator's brain as it is to interest a religious leader in modifying religion so it will help people to get
Tremendous
more from
defensive
life.
acumen from
The
Laporte.
quickest and surest way to force practical ideas into the public schools
And now
is
Kevin
to
De Bruyne.
first introduce the ideas through private
Inside.
schools and establish such a demand for their use that public school
Well, they've
officials
lost
can
it.
be compelled to employ them.
Should any other changes be made in the public school
On
system?
the chance.
Yes, many. Among other changes
Return
needed
to
in all
Conte.
public school
Now this couldn't keep
programs is the
himself
addition of a
onside.
complete course of training in the psychology of harmonious negotiation between people. All children should be taught how to sell their way through life with the minimum
De Bruyne.
amount of friction. Every public school should teach the
And now
principles of
he's
individual achievement through which one may attain to a
So a
position
throw
of
in
financial
here.
independence. Classes should be abolished altogether. They should be replaced by the round table or
Tremendous
conference system,
intuition
such as
to win it
businessmen
back.
employ. All students should receive individual instruction and guidance in connection
Well,
with
you can
subjects
probably see
which cannot be
why we're
properly
focusing
taught.
on this fellow as
Every
one to
school should
watch.
have an auxiliary
Lee,
group
in
of
particular,
instructors
what do you
consisting
expect to
of
see
business and
from his
professional
game?
people.
Well, how do you stop him?
Scientists,
4 goals in
artists,
3
engineers,
games.
and
I
newspapermen,
suggest the defenders,
each of whom
not
would
just
impart
one
to
of them,
all the
2s
students
and
a
3.
practical working knowledge of his own
Almost an early
profession,
test of
business, or
officialdom.
occupation.
What's the referee
This
going to do?
instruction should be conducted through the
Referees like
conference
to
system
manage the
to
game
save the
just as
time.
much as players do. But
What
today,
you
it
have
is an
suggested
early
is,
yellow
in
card, and
effect,
we'll see
an
what effect
auxiliary
that has
system
on
of
the match.
instruction
Well, it'll have a big
that would
effect,
give all
especially on the
school
player.
children
And
a
also
working
the
knowledge of
defenders
the
around that
practical
player that's
affairs
been
of
booked
life,
early in the
direct from
game,
the
because they
original
now know
source. Is that
he's
the
walking
idea?
a tightrope.
You've stated it correctly.
Let us dismiss the public school system
Into
and
the
go back
box
to the
it
churches
goes.
for a minute. All my
That's
life,
clear.
I've heard clergymen preaching
Coque with
against
it.
sin, warning
Conte.
sinners to beware and repent so they could be saved.
Alexandro.
But I've never heard any of them tell me what
Straight
sin
at the keeper,
is.
but
Will
technically
you give me
good
some light
goalkeeping.
on this subject?
Sin is anything one does or thinks which
He's the
causes
player
one to
many
be
people have
unhappy.
focused on in the
Human
build-up
beings
to
who are in
today's match.
sound
The rumours
physical and
are true.
spiritual health
He is
should
going
be
to
at peace
end
with
his
themselves and
wonderful
always
career at
happy.
the end of this
Any
season.
form of mental
And
or
what a loss
physical
for the club.
misery
That
indicates
is
the
bound to
presence
be,
of
Lee.
sin.
And the keeper
Name some of
acquitted
the
himself
common
well.
forms.
Yeah, it was a good ball in, wasn't it?
It is a
The keeper
sin
did
to
everything
overeat
right.
because that leads to ill health and misery. It is a sin to overindulge in sex because that breaks down one's willpower and leads to the habit of drifting.
Ericsson.
It
Good
is a
vision. Can he
sin to
get
permit
onto
one's
this?
mind to be
Taking
dominated
care of
by
business
negative thoughts of
defensively
envy,
here.
greed, fear, hatred, intolerance,
Bailey.
vanity, self-pity, or
N'Golo
discouragement. Because these states of
Bailey.
mind lead to the habit
Alexandro
of
now.
drifting. It is a sin to
Alexandro.
cheat, lie, and steal.
Opportunity to deliver the
Because
cross.
these habits destroy self-respect, subdue one's conscience, and lead to unhappiness.
Conte.
It is a sin to remain in ignorance, because that leads to poverty and loss of self-reliance. It is a
Ericsson.
sin to accept from life anything one does not want,
Sterling has it.
because that indicates an unpardonable neglect to use the
And on the
mind.
ball, Gaillard.
Is it a sin for one
Excellent
to
challenge.
drift through life without definite aim, plan, or purpose?
Yes, because this habit leads to poverty and
Sterling has
destroys
it.
the privilege of
He could pick out a
self-determination.
teammate.
It also deprives one of the privilege of using his
Ericsson.
own mind as a medium of contact with
Rodri.
infinite intelligence.
Are
Almost
you
got
the
the
chief
goalkeeper's
inspirer
ball.
of sin?
Yes, It is my business to gain control of the minds of people in every way possible.
Conte.
Can you control the
Given
mind of
away
a
by
person who
Chelsea.
commits no sin?
Because that person never permits his mind to be dominated by any form of negative thought. I cannot enter the mind of one who
Conte.
never sins. let
Might be
alone
able to get in
performs.
behind the
What is
defence.
the commonest and
Good
most
have the ball, but
destructive
not
of all
anymore.
sins?
Fear and ignorance.
Have you nothing else to add to the list?
There is nothing else to be added.
What is faith?
It is a state of mind
It's
wherein
with
one
Laporte.
recognizes and uses the power
Sterling
of
has it.
positive thought as a
After
medium
that
by which one
fantastic effort,
contacts
it's
and
gone
draws
out for a
upon the
throw-in.
universal store of infinite intelligence at will.
In other words, faith is the
Sterling.
absence of all forms of negative thought. Is that the idea?
It's with Gaia
Yes,
now.
that is another way of
Sterling has
describing
it.
it.
Has a drifter the
Eriksen.
capacity to use faith?
He may have
Here's
the
Gabriel
capacity,
Jesus.
but he does not.
Terrific block there.
Everyone
Well,
has
the
the
counter
potential
chance
power
looks
to clear
very
his
real.
mind of all negative thoughts, and thereby avail himself of the power of faith.
Stating the matter in
Conte.
another way, faith is definiteness of purpose backed by
Well
belief
read
in
to
the
ease the
attainment
pressure.
of the object of that purpose. Is that correct?
That's the idea exactly.
Sterling has it.
What preparation must one
on
undergo
the ball,
before being
Gaia.
able to move with
It's
definiteness
with
of
Laporte.
purpose at all times?
One must gain
Eriksen.
mastery over self.
It's with Gaia
This is
now.
the second of the 7 principles.
Eriksen.
The person who is not master of himself
Making
can never be
progress.
master of others.
Well, they're
Lack
moving
of
the ball neatly
self-mastery
enough.
is of
Got a
itself the most
decisive pass.
destructive form of indefiniteness.
Where should one begin when making a start at control
It's
over
with
self?
Gaia now.
By mastering the 3 appetites responsible for most of
Rodri.
one's lack of self-discipline.
Oh, first straight
The
block
3
by
appetites
Ramos.
are 1. The
Losing
desire for
possession
food.
a bit
2.
easily.
The desire for expression of sex. 3. The desire to express
Dembele.
loosely
Now,
organized
counter-attacking
opinions.
possibilities here.
Does man have other appetites which
Regain
need control?
possession.
Yes, many
Looked
of
like
them.
open road
But
for
these
them,
3
but
are the
up a
ones
dead
which
end.
should be conquered first.
Hunter has
When a
it.
man becomes master of these 3
let's
appetites,
see what
he
they
has
can do
developed
here.
enough self-discipline to conquer easily those of lesser.
Will he finish?
But these are natural
Chelsea have
appetites.
come up with a
They
goal.
must be
Well, they've
indulged if
crumbled.
one is to be
Defence crumbled in front of their eyes.
To be sure, they are natural appetites, but they are also dangerous, because people who have not mastered themselves overfeed the
Well, here
appetites.
is the replay, and to be fair, the keeper
Contemplates
from that
sufficient
distance
control
hasn't
over
got
the
much chance of
appetites to
keeping it
enable
out.
one to feed
Lovely
them what
goal.
they need, and withhold food not needed.
And they are
Your
back
viewpoint
underway.
is both
Chelsea
interesting and
with the
educational.
advantage.
Describe the details through which I may understand how and under what circumstances people overfeed the appetites.
Take the desire for physical food, for example.
Rodri.
The majority of people are so weak in
Bernardo
self-discipline,
Silva.
they fill their stomachs with combinations of rich food, which please the taste, but overwork the organs
Eriksen.
of digestion and elimination. They
Can't
pour
get
into
past
their
Sergio
stomachs both
Ramos.
quantity and combinations of food, which the body chemist can
Eriksen.
dispose of only by converting the
It's
food
with
into
Bernardo
deadly
Silva.
toxic poisons. These poisons
Inside.
clog and stagnate the
Eriksen.
body's sewer system until it
De Bruyne.
slows down in its work of elimination of waste matter. After a
Possession
while, the
one.
sewer system stops working altogether, and the victim
This might
has
be the
what he
perfect
calls
counter-attacking opportunity.
By
And
that
now
time,
waiting
he's
to
headed for the
pass.
hospital.
Really important tackle.
Auto-intoxication, or body sewer poisoning, takes the machinery of the brain and
It's with
rolls it
Bernardo
into
Silva.
something resembling a wad of putty. The victim then becomes sluggish in his physical movements
They've
and mentally
regained possession.
irritable and fussy. If he could only take one good look at and one bad
Rather than a
smell
free
on
kick,
his sewer
beautifully
system, he would be
disguised ball.
ashamed to look himself in the
Well,
face.
not quite.
City
It might
sewers
be.
are not the pleasantest of
Chelsea
places
have
when you
done
become
it.
overloaded
It's
or
going to be
clogged,
so
but they
difficult
are
to
clean and
stop them
sweet
now.
compared with the intestinal sewer when it is overloaded or clogged. This is not a pretty story to be associated with the pleasant and necessary act of eating, but that is where the matter is, because
Well, as we can
overeating
see,
and
it's
wrong
all
food
about
combinations
technique.
are the
That's where the
evils
power
which
comes
cause
from.
body
Blistering
intoxication.
shot.
People who eat wisely and keep their body sewers clean can be healthy,
It's going
because a
their
clean
way.
body
2-0.
sewer generally means a sound body and a brain that functions properly. Imagine, if your imagination can be stretched that far,
And
how
on the
any
ball,
human being
Gaia.
could move with definiteness of purpose with his body sewer filled with enough poison to kill 100
Ball with
people if it
Rodri.
were injected into their bloodstream.
Eriksen.
And all this trouble
Let's
is
have
the
a
result of
double
lack of
possession.
control over the physical appetite for food.
Well, if you wish to be
Manuel
absolutely
Akanji.
correct, you should say that improper eating is responsible for the majority of the ills of the body,
Conte
and
now.
practically all headaches. If you want proof of this, select 100 people suffering with headaches
N'Golo
and give
Conte.
each of them a thorough washing out of their
Dembele.
body sewer
That's a
systems with a
quality
honey
pass.
enema. and observe that no fewer than 95 of the headaches will
very good
disappear within a few
challenge.
minutes after the sewers have been cleaned.
From all you say about the intestinal tract,
De Bruyne
I
now.
gathered the impression that mastery over the physical
And on the
appetite
ball,
for food
Gaia.
means also mastery over the habit
with
of
Laporte.
neglecting to keep the
It's
intestines
with Gaia
clean.
now.
Yes, that is true. It is just as important to
Sterling has
eliminate
it.
the waste matter of the
Rodri.
body and the unused portions of food
Couldn't keep
as it
the
is to
ball.
take the right amount and the correct combinations.
Conte.
I never thought of auto intoxication
It
as
has
being
to
one
be.
of your devices
Well,
of
in some
control.
style, Ederson
And I'm
prevents a
utterly
goal.
shocked to know how many people are victims of this subtle enemy. Let's hear what you have to say of the other two appetites.
Well, we'll take the desire for sex expression. Now there is a force with which I master the weak
Played
and
into
the
the centre
strong,
of the box.
the old and the young, the ignorant and the wise. In fact, I master all who neglect to
They don't
master
have the ball, but
sex.
not anymore.
How can one master the emotion of sex?
By the simple process of transmuting that
Right
emotion
now.
into some form of activity other than copulation. Sex is one of
Gabriel
the greatest of
Jesus.
all forces which motivate human
Wonderful
beings.
chance.
Because of this
Unable
fact,
to find
it
the
is
back of
also
the
one
net,
of the
and
most
still a lot of
dangerous
work ahead of
forces.
them here.
If
Well, he
humans
probably
would control
surprised if
their
he scored
sex
from there, but it
desires
is
and
worth an
transmute
effort.
them into a driving force with which to carry on their
And 3
occupation,
minutes will be added
that
on for
is, if they
stoppages.
spent on their work one half the
Arthur has
time
it.
they dissipate in pursuit of sex, they would never know poverty.
Do I understand you to imply there is a relationship between sex and
side.
poverty?
Yes, where sex is not under definite control.
Gabriel
If
Jesus
allowed to
now.
run its natural course,
De Bruyne.
sex will quickly lead one into the habit of
Thiago
drifting.
Silva.
Is there any relationship between sex and leadership?
Yes, all great
Christian
leaders in
Eriksen
every
now.
walk of life are highly sexed, but they follow the
Read it
habit of
magnificently
controlling
and
their sex
intercepted.
desires, switching them into
So
a
the first
driving
half
force
draws to a
behind their
close
occupation.
here in West London.
Is the habit of overindulgence in sex as dangerous as the habit of taking a
Focusing on him for a
There
reason.
is no
He's playing with
difference
real
between these
authority and
habits.
attack
Both
lead.
lead to
Well, his
hypnotic
movement is
control through the habit of drifting.
Why does the world look upon sex as something vulgar?
Because of the vulgar abuse people have made of this emotion. It is not sex that is vulgar. It is the individual who neglects or refuses to control and guide it.
Do you mean by your statement that one should not indulge the desire for sex?
No, I mean that sex, like all other forces available to man, should be understood, mastered, and made to serve man. The desire for sex expression is as natural as the desire for food. The desire can no more be killed than one can entirely stop a river from flowing. If the emotion of sex is shut off from the natural mode of expression, it will break out in some other, less desirable form. Just as a river will, if dammed, break through and flow around the dam. The person who has self-discipline understands the emotion of sex, respects it, and learns to control and transmute it into constructive activities.
And just what damage is there in overindulgence of sex?
The greatest damage is that it depletes the source of man's greatest driving force and wastes, without adequate compensation, man's creative energy. It dissipates energy needed by nature to maintain physical health. Sex is nature's most useful therapeutic force. It depletes the magnetic energy which is the source of an attractive, pleasing personality. It removes the sparkle from one's eyes and sets up discord in the tone of one's voice. It destroys enthusiasm, subdues ambition, and leads inevitably to the habit of drifting on all subjects.
I would like for you to answer my question in another way by telling me what beneficial ends the emotion of sex may be made to attain if mastered and transmuted.
Controlled sex supplies the magnetic force that attracts people to one another. It is the most important factor of a pleasing personality. It gives quality to the tone of voice and enables one to convey through the voice any feeling desired. It serves as nothing else can serve to give motive power to one's desires. It keeps the nervous system charged with the energy needed to carry on the work of maintaining the body. It sharpens the imagination and enables one to create useful ideas. It gives quickness and definiteness to one's physical and mental movements. It gives one persistence and perseverance in the pursuit of one's major purpose in life. It is a great antidote for all fear.
Second half.
It gives
of
one
this
immunity
Champions League
against
semi-final
discouragement.
first leg
It helps to master
underway.
laziness and procrastination. It gives one physical and mental endurance while undergoing any form of opposition or defeat. It gives one the fighting qualities necessary
Eriksen.
under all circumstances for
Rodri.
self-defense.
De Bruyne.
In brief,
Good
it
use
makes
of the ball,
winners
but
and
can they
not
trouble the
quitters.
defence?
Are those
comes
all
to
the
nothing.
advantages you claim for controlled sex energy?
No, they are only some of the more important
Bruyne.
benefits it provides.
Good-looking sequence.
Perhaps some would believe the greatest of all the virtues of
Move
sex
looks as though
is
it
that
had
it is
genuine
nature's method
potential,
of
but it's
perpetuation of
broken
all living things. This alone
N'Golo
should
Kanté.
remove all thought that sex is vulgar.
I must say,
I
no
gather
shortage
from
of
what you
space.
say that the emotion of sex
Splendid
is a
defending,
virtue,
and
not
it
a
needed
fault.
to be.
It is a virtue when
Cleared
controlled
away.
and directed to the attainment of desirable ends. It is a fault when neglected and permitted to lead to acts of lust.
Bailey.
Why aren't
Kanté.
these truths taught to children by their
Dembele.
parents in the public schools?
The neglect is due to ignorance of the real nature of sex. It is just as
And a
necessary
friendly
in
reminder
maintaining
that we
health
have
for
more
one to
action from
understand
the
and
Premier
properly
League
use the
coming up.
emotion of
It's
sex
Chelsea
as it
taking
is
on
to
Leeds
keep the body
United.
serious
Yeah,
system functioning.
atmospheres make games,
Those
Derek,
subjects should
and
be
that
taught in
should be
all
an
public
absolute
schools and all
belter.
homes where there are children.
And
Wouldn't the
Manchester
majority
City
of
will
parents
go to
need
their bench.
instruction in the proper function and use of sex before they could intelligently teach
Easy
their
meat.
children?
Yes, and so would the public school teachers.
What relative position of importance would you give to the need for accurate knowledge on the subject of sex?
And
It
don't
is
forget,
next
we
to
have
the
more
top of the
Premier League
list.
action coming
There
up
is
for
but
you
one
on
thing of
EA
greater
TV.
importance to
Might be a
human
chance
beings.
here.
That is accurate thought.
And a goal!
Do I understand
Not
you to say
over
that
just
knowledge
yet.
of the true functions of sex and ability to think
2-1
accurately
it is
are the
here.
two things of greatest importance to mankind?
That is what I intend you to understand. Accurate thinking comes first because it is the solution to all man's problems, the answer to all his prayers,
Joao
the source of
Cancelo.
opulence and all
Kanté
material
now.
possessions. Accurate thinking is aided by properly controlled
Quick
and
thinking
directed
to
sex
dispossess his
emotion,
opponent.
because sex emotion is the same energy as that with which one thinks. It begins
Alexandro
with
now.
those who desire self-determination sufficiently to be
Kovacic
willing to
seeing
pay
his
its
pass
price.
intercepted.
No one can be entirely free.
Danger averted
Spiritually,
for now.
mentally, physically, and economically, without
Well, the
learning
back
the art of
pages and
accurate
social
thinking.
media are chock
No
full
one
of
can learn to
transfer
think
rumours, but there
accurately
does
without
appear to be
including,
something
as a part of
behind
the needed
this.
knowledge,
Lee, what do you make of it?
information on the
Well,
control
Derek,
of
I've heard
sex
around
emotion
50
through
million pounds for
transmutation.
this player. The bids, I think,
Will be
gone
a
in.
great surprise
Is
to
that
many
going to be
people
enough
to
to
learn
prize
there
him
is
away
so
from
close a
Manchester United?
relationship between thinking and sex emotion.
Well, still
Tell us now
searching for the
about the third
equaliser,
appetite,
but not
and
passing
let's
it
see what it
anxiously.
has to do with self-discipline.
The habit of expressing loosely organized opinions
Referee
is
has
one of the
decided
most
to give the
destructive
free kick
habits.
decision the way it's
Its
sitting.
destructiveness
He's now
consists in
going
its
to be
tendency
extra
to
careful.
influence
A
people to
verbal warning
guess
rather
instead
than
of
a caution
searching
here.
for facts
Yeah, the
when they
next
form
one, he knows
opinions,
where he's going
create
in the book.
ideas or organize plans.
Aguero, and that's gone out
The
of
habit
play
develops
for
a
what will be a
grasshopper
goal
mind,
kick.
one that jumps from one thing to another but never completes anything. And of course, carelessness in the expression of opinions leads to the habit of drifting.
And 30
From
minutes
there, it
left
is
for
only
play
a
in
step
this
or
match.
two until one is bound by the law of
Couldn't keep
hypnotic
it.
rhythm, which automatically prohibits accurate thinking.
What other disadvantages are there
And
in
on
free
the ball,
expression
Gaia.
of opinions?
Christian Eriksen now.
The person who talks too much informs the world of his
Manchester
aims
City
and
moving the
plans,
ball
and
with
gives to others
purpose.
the opportunity to profit by
Aguero.
his ideas.
And the decision
Wise
is one
men
of
keep their plans
offside
to
here.
themselves and refrain from
A change in
expressing
the
uninvited
offing for
opinions.
City.
This prevents others from appropriating their ideas and makes it difficult for others to appeal with their plans.
Untidy in
Why
possession.
do so many people indulge in the habit of expressing uninvited opinions?
The
Eriksen.
habit is one way of expressing
Aguero.
egotism and
Rodri.
vanity. The desire
And the
for
cross is very
self-expression is
much on.
inborn in people. The
Wonderful
motive
tackle.
back of the habit is to attract the attention of others and to impress them
Given
favorably.
away by Chelsea.
Actually, it has just the opposite effect. When the self-invited speaker attracts attention, it
Straightforward piece of
usually
goal.
is unfavorable.
Yes. What other disadvantages has the habit?
The person who insists on talking seldom has an opportunity to learn by listening to others.
But isn't it true that a magnetic speaker often puts himself in the way of opportunity to benefit himself by attracting the attention of others through his powers of oratory?
Yes, a magnetic orator does have an asset of tremendous value in his ability to impress people by his speech. But he cannot make the best use of this asset if he forces his speech on others without their invitation. No single quality adds more to one's personality than the ability to speak with emotional feeling, force, and conviction. But the speaker must not impose his speech upon others without being invited to do so. There is an old saying that nothing is worth more than its actual cost. This applies as well to the free, uninvited expression of opinions as to material things.
What about people who volunteer their opinions by expressing them in writing? Do they also suffer by lack of self-discipline?
One of the worst pests on earth is the person who writes uninvited letters to people of prominence. Men in public office, moving picture stars, men who have succeeded in business or written a best-selling book. And people whose names appear often in the newspapers are continuously besieged by people who write letters expressing their opinion on all subjects.
But the writing of uninvited letters is a harmless way of finding pleasure through self-expression, is it not? What damage does one do by the habit?
Habits are contagious. Every habit attracts a flock of its relatives. The habit of doing anything that is useless leads to the formation of other habits that are useless, especially the habit of drifting. But that is not all the dangers associated with the habit of indulging in uninvited expression of opinions. The habit creates enemies and places in their hands dangerous weapons by which they may do great injury to the one who indulges in it. Thieves and confidence men and racketeers pay big prices for the names and addresses of the writers of uninvited letters. Knowing as they do, the writers of these letters become easy victims of all manner of schemes that result in the loss of their money. They refer to the writers of such letters as nuts. If you wish to know how foolish people are who write uninvited letters, read the nut column of any newspaper, the column in which the paper publishes the voluntary opinions of its readers.
For a
You
Manchester
will see
City
for
throw-in.
yourself how the writers of such letters
They will now
antagonize
make
people
use
and
of
invite
their
opposition
substitutes
from
bench.
others.
Now, I had no idea, Your Majesty, that people get into so much difficulty through uninvited expression of their opinions. But now that you've brought up the subject, I do remember writing the editor of a prominent magazine
Eriksen
an
now.
uninvited letter of
Sané.
criticism, which cost me
Eriksen.
a fine position in his staff, at a fat salary.
That is a perfect
A
example.
meaty but fair
The
challenge.
proper place to
And it will be
begin
a throw-in.
self-discipline is right where you stand. The way to begin is by recognizing the truth, that there is
Eriksen.
nothing for good or evil throughout the myriads of universes except the
Well,
power
great
of
read there
natural
to
law.
intercept.
There is no individual
They might be able to
personality
get in
anywhere
now.
throughout the myriad of
Dembele.
universes with the slightest power to influence a human being, save nature and human beings
Time to play it
themselves.
over.
There is
That's
no
very
human
smart
being
defending, and
now
now they have the
living.
ball
No
again.
human being has ever lived, and no human being ever will live with the right or the power to deprive another
Conte
human
now.
being of the inborn privilege of free and independent thought.
Opportunity.
That privilege is the only law over which any human being can have absolute control. No adult human being ever loses the right to freedom of thought, but most humans lose the benefits of this privilege either by neglect or because it has been taken away from them by their parents
Corner
or
kick
religious
played
instructors
over.
before the age of understanding. These are self-evident truths, no less
Forward,
important because they are
Maximin.
being called to your attention by the devil than they would be if brought to your attention by my
Conte.
opposition.
Saint-Maximin.
But what are people going to lean upon in the hour
It's
of
the kind of
emergency?
shielding
when
play
they
you
know
expect
not
from
where
him.
nor to whom to
They've got
appeal?
shot
Let them
attempted.
lean upon the only
Diving
dependable
stop
power
from quality
available to
from
any human
Ederson.
being.
Well, he's got springs in his boots, hasn't he? Look at that.
Themselves. The power of their own thoughts. The only power they can control and may rely upon. The only power which cannot be perverted, colored, modified, or falsified by the dishonest fellow human beings.
All you say seems logical, but why must I come to the
Corner kick
devil to
played in.
discover such profound
It all
truths?
counts for naught.
Let's get back to the 7 principles. We've already disclosed enough
Akanji
information
has
to
it.
show clearly that the secret of
Arthur
how
has
to
it.
break the power of hypnotic rhythm
And
is
options
wrapped
in
in
the
the 7
centre.
principles. You have shown, too,
Conte.
that the most important of these principles is
Excellent
self-discipline.
defending.
Now, go ahead and describe the other 5 principles you have not yet mentioned and indicate what part they play in giving one self-discipline.
And it's a matter
First,
of what
let me
occurs in
summarize
the
that
final
part of my
15 minutes.
confession you have already covered. I have frankly told you that my 2 most effective
Arthur has
devices
it.
for mastering
Bailey.
human beings are the habit of
Conte.
drifting
Here's
and the law
Kovacic.
of hypnotic rhythm. I have shown you that drifting is
Dembele.
not a natural law, but a man-made habit
is a
which
very
leads to
fine
man's
challenge in
submission to the
difficult
law of hypnotic
circumstances.
rhythm. The 7 principles are the
perfectly
media
set up
by
for the
which man may
counter-attack,
break
you
the
know.
hold of hypnotic rhythm and take possession again of his own
Couldn't
mind.
keep the ball.
You see, therefore, the 7 principles
Oh,
are
he
the
needs to
7
be careful
steps
here.
which lead victims of hypnotic
attempt
rhythm
at a
out
pass,
of the
really.
self-made prisons in which they are bound.
Aguero. Excellent
The 7
vision.
principles are the
Eriksen.
master key that unlocks
that's
the
a
door to
splendid piece
spiritual,
of challenging.
mental, and economic self-determination. Is that true?
Yes, that's another way of stating the truth.
Is failure ever a benefit to man?
Yes. Indeed, learning from adversity is the 3rd of the 7 principles. But few people know that every adversity brings with it the seed of an
for
equivalent
Manchester
advantage.
City it'll be.
Still fewer people know the difference between
Substitution
temporary
time it
defeat
is.
and failure. If this knowledge were generally known, I would be deprived of one of my strongest
Oh,
weapons of
just
control
listen to
over
these
human
Chelsea
beings.
fans. The crowd
But I
very much
understood
behind
you to
the
say
team.
that
It's
failure
been a
was
tough
one of
game,
your
but not long
greatest
to go
allies.
now to see
I got
this
the
out.
impression from your confession that failure causes people to
And now
lose
Kevin De
ambition
Bruyne.
and quit trying, and then you take them over without opposition on their part.
That is just the point. I take them over
Bruyne.
after they quit trying.
Here's Bernardo
If they knew
Silva.
the difference between
Cleared
temporary
away.
defeat and failure, they would not quit when they meet
possibilities.
with opposition for a while. If they knew that every form of
Bruyne.
defeat and all failures bring with them the seed of unborn opportunity, they would
Conte.
keep on fighting and win. Success usually is but one short step
Maximin
beyond
has
the
it.
point where one quits fighting.
Is that all one might
Eriksen.
learn from adversity,
Rodri.
defeat, and failure?
Oh, that is the least of what one might learn.
Eriksen. And
I
back
hate
with
to tell you
Rodri.
this, but failure
Delivered by
often serves
Bernardo
as a
Silva
blessing in
here.
disguise
An
because it
opportunity
breaks the
with the
grip of
header,
hypnotic
but
rhythm
not
and
troubling the
frees the
goalkeeper
mind for
at
a
all,
fresh
Lee.
start.
Well, I say
Now
one
we are
thing,
getting somewhere.
technique,
So,
and he didn't have
you have
any.
confessed at long last that even nature's law of hypnotic rhythm can be, and often is, annulled by nature herself.
Conte.
Is that correct?
No,
Conte
that is
now.
not stating the matter
Ball with
accurately.
Maximin.
Nature never reverses any of
Manuel
her natural
Akanji.
laws. Nature does not take away a human being's
Conte.
freedom of thought
A
through
highly
hypnotic
purposeful
rhythm.
attack this.
The individual
The
gives
emphasis
up
on getting
this
the ball
freedom by
forward.
use of his thought. If a man jumps from a tree and is killed by the
A
sudden
very good
impact of his body
challenge.
with the earth through the law of gravity, you wouldn't say nature
Ball
murdered
with
him, would you?
Maximin.
You
Conte.
would say the man neglected to relate
Deft
himself
read by
properly to the law
Eriksen.
of gravity.
Intense
I'm beginning to
pressure.
see. The law of hypnotic rhythm is capable of both negative and positive
Perfectly by
application.
Otamendi.
It may drag
They're not
one
giving
down
their
to slavery
opponents any
through
time
loss
to
of the
breathe.
privilege of freedom of thought, or it may help one rise to great heights of achievement through the free use of thought, depending
given
on
the
how
ball
the
away
individual relates
unnecessarily.
himself to the law. Is that correct?
Now you have it.
And the referee is going to add on 3 minutes.
One does not
Tremendous
fail
intuition
intentionally
to
with
win it
purpose
back.
of forethought. No one encourages temporary defeat. These are circumstances over which the individual
couldn't
often
keep
has
the ball.
no control whatsoever. How then can it be said that nature does not take away one's freedom of thought when failure destroys ambition, willpower,
Excellent
and the
challenge.
self-confidence essential to make a fresh start?
Failure is a man-made circumstance. It is never real until it has been
Manchester City
accepted by
have
man
work
as
to do,
failure.
but is it going to
Stating
happen
another
for them? And
Failure
caught
is
with
a
ease,
state
no
of
real threat
mind.
from the cross.
Therefore, it is something an individual can control until he
Full time
neglects to
then, and
exercise it.
Chelsea will carry a
Nature
lead
does not
into the
force
second leg of this
people.
time.
But nature does impose her law of hypnotic rhythm upon all minds, and through this law gives permanency to the thoughts which dominate those minds. In other words, failure thoughts are taken over by the law of hypnotic rhythm and made permanent if the individual accepts any circumstances as being permanent failure. That same law just as readily takes over
Time
and
for
makes
just a few
permanent
questions.
thoughts of success.
What part then does failure play in helping an individual break the grip of hypnotic rhythm after that law has been fastened upon his mind?
Failure brings a climax in which one has the privilege of clearing his mind of fear and making a new start in another direction. Failure proves conclusively that something is wrong with one's aims or
Thanks
the
very
plans
much.
by which the object of these aims is sought. Failure is the dead end of the habit path one has been following, and when it is reached, it forces one to leave that path and take up another, thereby creating a new rhythm. But failure does more than this. It gives an individual an opportunity to test himself, wherein he may learn how much willpower he possesses. Failure also forces people to learn many truths they would never discover without it. Failure often leads an individual to an understanding of the power of self-discipline, without which no one could turn back after having once been the victim of hypnotic rhythm. Study the lives of all people who achieve outstanding success in any calling, and observe with profit that their success is usually in exact ratio to their experiences of defeat before succeeding.
Is this all you have to say of the advantages of failure?
No, I have barely begun. If you want the real significance of adversity, failure, defeat, and all other experiences which break up a human being's habits and force him to form new habits, watch nature at her work. Nature uses illness to break the physical rhythm of the body when the cells and organs become improperly related. She uses economic depressions to break the rhythm of mass thought when great numbers of people become improperly related, through business, social, and political activities. And she uses failure to break the rhythm of negative thought when an individual becomes improperly related to himself in his own mind. Observe carefully, and you will see that everywhere in nature there is always at work a natural law which gives eternal change to all matter, all energy, and to the power of thought. The only permanent thing in the universe is change, eternal, inexorable change, through which every atom of matter and every unit of energy has the opportunity to properly relate itself to all other units of matter and energy. And every human being has the opportunity and the privilege of properly relating himself to all other human beings, no matter how many mistakes he makes, or how many times or in what ways he may be defeated. When mass failure overtakes a nation, such as the 1929 World Business Depression, the circumstance is in perfect harmony with nature's plan to break up man's habits and give out fresh opportunities.
What you are saying intrigues me. Am I to understand that hypnotic rhythm has something to do with the way people relate themselves to one another?
That abstract, elusive thing called character is nothing but a manifestation of the law of hypnotic rhythm. Therefore, when speaking of one's character, it would be proper to say his thought habits have been crystallized into a positive or a negative personality. Through hypnotic rhythm, one is good or bad because of the knitting together of his thoughts and deeds through hypnotic rhythm. One is bound by poverty or blessed with abundance because his aims, plans, and desires, or lack of them, have been made permanent and real by hypnotic rhythm.
Is that all you have to say of the connection between hypnotic rhythm and human relationships?
No, I have just begun. Remember, while I am talking, I am speaking of the influence of hypnotic rhythm in connection with all human relationships. Men who succeed in business do so entirely because of the way they relate themselves to their associates and to others outside of the business. Professional men who succeed do so largely because of the manner in which they relate themselves to their clients. It is much more important for the lawyer to know people and to know the laws of nature than it is to know the law. And the doctor is a failure before he starts unless he knows how to relate himself to his patients so as to establish their faith in him. Marriage succeeds or fails entirely because of the manner in which the participants
Thank you everyone for
relate
coming.
themselves
Thank
to
you.
one
Can we
another.
take your seats?
Proper
And we'll start getting the
relationship in
questions
marriage
in now.
begins with a proper motive for the marriage. Most marriages do not bring happiness because the contracting parties neither understand nor attempt to understand the law of hypnotic rhythm, through the operation of which every word they speak, every act in which they engage, and every motive by which they are inspired to deal with each other is picked up and woven into a web that entangles them in controversial misery, or gives to them the wings of freedom through which they soar above all forms of unhappiness. Every newly made acquaintanceship between people ripens into friendship and then into spiritual harmony, sometimes called love, or plants a germ of suspicion and doubt which evolves and grows into open rebellion, according to the way in which the participants in the acquaintanceship relate themselves to one another. Hypnotic rhythm picks up the dominating motives, aims, purposes, and feelings of the contacting minds, and weaves these into some degree of faith or fear, love or hatred. After the pattern has taken definite shape, as it does with time, it is forced upon the contacting minds and made a part thereof. In this silent way does nature make permanent the dominating factors of every human relationship. In every human relationship, the evil motives and the evil deeds of the contacting individuals are coordinated and consolidated into definite form and subtly woven into that all-important human trait known as character. In the same manner, the motives and the deeds of good are consolidated and forced upon the individual. You see, therefore, it is not only one's deeds, but also one's very thoughts which determine the nature of all human relationships.
You are leading into pretty deep water. Let's keep it near the shore, where I can follow you without fear of getting beyond a safe depth. Go ahead and tell me how this subject of human relationships actually works in the current affairs of a problem-filled world such as we have today.
That is a happy thought. But let me make sure you understand the principles I am telling about, before I try to show you how to apply them in the affairs of life. I wish to be sure you understand that the law of hypnotic rhythm is something that no one can control, influence, or evade. But everyone can relate himself to this law so as to benefit by its inexorable operation. Harmonious relationship with the law consists entirely of the individual changing his habits so they represent the circumstances and the things the individual wants and is willing to accept. No one can change the law of hypnotic rhythm any more than one can change the law of gravity, but everyone can change himself. Remember, therefore, in all the discussion of this subject, that all human relationships are made and maintained by the habits of the individuals related. The law of hypnotic rhythm plays only the part of solidifying the factors which constitute human relationships, but it does not create those factors. Before we go further with the discussion of human relationships, I want you to get a clear understanding of the subconscious mind. The term subconscious mind represents a hypothetical physical organ which has no actual existence. The mind of man consists of universal energy, some call it infinite intelligence, which the individual receives, appropriates, and organizes in definite thought forms through the network of intricate physical apparatus known as a brain. These thought forms are replicas of various stimuli which reach the brain through the 5 commonly known physical senses, and the 6th sense, which is not so well known. When any form of stimuli reaches the brain and takes the definite shape of thought, it is classified and stored away in a group of the brain cells known as the memory group. All thoughts of a similar nature are stored together, so that the bringing forth of one leads to easy contact with all its associates. The system is very similar to the modern office filing cabinet, and it is operated in a similar manner. The thought impressions with which one mixes the greatest amount of emotion, or feeling, are the dominating factors of the brain, because they are always near the surface, at the top of the filing system, so to speak, where they spring into action voluntarily the moment an individual neglects to exercise self-discipline. These emotion-laden thoughts are so powerful, they often cause an individual to rush into action and indulge in deeds which have not been submitted to or approved by his reasoning faculty. These emotional outbursts usually destroy harmony in all human relationships. The brain often brings together combinations of emotional feelings so powerful they completely set aside the control of the reasoning faculty. On all such occasions, human relationships are apt to be lacking in harmony. Through the operation of the 6th sense, the brain of a human being may contact the filing cabinet of other brains and inspect at will whatever thought impressions are on file there. The condition under which one person may contact and inspect the filing cabinet of another person's brain is generally known as harmony. But you may better understand what is meant if I say brains attuned to the same rate of thought vibrations can easily and quickly exercise the privilege of entering and inspecting each other's filing cabinets of thoughts. In addition to receiving organized thoughts from the filing cabinets of other brains through the 6th sense, one can, through this same physical organ, contact and receive information from the universal storehouse known as infinite intelligence. All information reaching one's brain through the 6th sense comes from sources not easily isolated or traced. Therefore, this sort of information is generally believed to come from one's subconscious mind. The 6th sense is the organ of the brain through which one receives all information, all knowledge, all thought impressions which do not come through one or more of the 5 physical senses. Now that you understand how the mind operates, you will more easily understand how and why people come to grief through improper human relationships. You will also understand how human relationship may be made to yield riches in their highest form, riches in material, mental, and spiritual estates. Moreover, you will understand there can never be happiness except through understanding and application of the right principles of human relationships. You will understand, too, that no individual is an entity unto himself, that completeness of mind can be attained only by harmony of purpose and deed between 2 or more minds. You will understand why every human being should, of his own choice, become his brother's keeper in fact, as well as in theory.
What you say may be true, but I still insist that you have me beyond safe depths of thought. Let us get back nearer to the shore, where I can wade in familiar water. We shall go out into the deeper water after we learn to swim well. We started out to discuss the subject of how to profit by adversity, but it seems we have drifted somewhat afield from that subject.
We have detoured, but we have not drifted. The devil never drifts. The detour was necessary in order that you might be prepared to understand the most important part of this entire interview. We are now ready to get back to the discussion of the subject of adversity. Inasmuch as most adversities grow out of improper relationships between people, it seems important to understand how people may become properly related. Naturally, the question arises as to what is a proper relationship between people. The answer is that the proper relationship is one that brings to all connected with it, or affected by it, some form of benefit.
What then is an improper relationship?
Any relationship between people which damages anyone, or brings any form of misery or unhappiness to any of the individuals.
How can improper relationships be corrected?
By change of mind of the person causing the improper relationship, or by changing the persons to the relationship. Some minds harmonize naturally, while others just as naturally clash. Successful human relationships, to endure as such, must be formed of minds that naturally harmonize, quite aside from the question of having common interests as a means of bringing them into harmony. When you speak of business leaders who succeed because they know how to pick men, you might more correctly say they succeed because they know how to associate minds which harmonize naturally. Knowing how to pick people successfully for any definite purpose in life is based upon ability to recognize the types of people whose minds naturally harmonize.
Stay focused on adversity, if you will. If there are possible benefits to be found through adversity, name some of them.
Adversity relieves people of vanity and egotism. It discourages selfishness by proving that no one can succeed without the cooperation of others. Adversity forces an individual to test his mental, physical, and spiritual strength. It thus brings him face to face with his weaknesses and gives him the opportunity to bridge them. Adversity forces one to seek ways and means to definite ends by meditation and introspective thought. This often leads to the discovery and use of the sixth sense, through which one may communicate with infinite intelligence. Adversity forces one to recognize the need for intelligence not available except from sources outside
Thanks,
of
guys.
one's own mind.
We're going to get started with the questions
Adversity breaks old habits of thought and gives one an opportunity to form new habits. Therefore, it may serve to break the hold of hypnotic rhythm and change its operation from negative to positive ends.
What is the greatest benefit one may receive through adversity?
The greatest benefit of adversity is that it may, and generally does, force one to change one's thought habits, thus breaking and redirecting the force of hypnotic rhythm.
In other words, failure always is a blessing when it forces one to acquire knowledge or to build habits that lead to the achievement of one's major purpose in life. Is that correct?
Yes, and something more. Failure is a blessing when it forces one to depend less upon material forces and more upon spiritual forces. Many human beings discover their other selves, the forces which operate through the power of thought, only after some catastrophe deprives them of the full and free use of their physical bodies. When a man can no longer use his hands and his feet, he usually begins to use his brain. Thus he puts himself in the way of discovering the power of his own mind.
What benefits may be derived from the loss of material things, money, for example?
The loss of material things may teach many needed lessons, none greater, however, than the truth that man has control over nothing and has no assurance of the permanent use of anything except his own power of thought.
I wonder if this is not the greatest benefit available through adversity.
No. The greatest potential benefit of any circumstance which causes one to make a fresh start is that it provides an opportunity to break the grip of hypnotic rhythm and set up a new set of thought habits. New habits offer the only way out for people who fail. Most people who escape from the negative to the positive operation of the law of hypnotic rhythm do so only because of some form of adversity which forces them to change their thought habits.
Isn't adversity apt to break one's self-reliance and cause one to give up hope?
It has that effect on those whose willpower is weak through long-established habits of drifting. It has the opposite effect on those who have not been weakened through drifting. The non-drifter meets with temporary defeat and failure, but his reaction to all forms of adversity is positive. He fights instead of giving up, and usually wins. Life gives no one immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. The individual is left with the privilege of using or neglecting to use his prerogative right to think his way through all adversities. Every individual is forced either to use his thought power for the attainment of definite positive ends, or by neglect or design, use this power for the attainment of negative ends. There can be no compromise, no refusal to use the mind. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces every individual to give some degree of use, either negative or positive, to his mind. But it does not influence the individual as to which use he will make of his mind.
Am I to understand from what you say that every adversity is a blessing?
No, I did not say that. I said there is the seed of an equivalent advantage in every adversity. I did not say there was the full-blown flower of advantage. Just
We're
the
starting
seed.
to get to the
Usually
nitty-gritty
the
now.
seed
Only
consists
4
of some
teams
form
remain
of
alive
knowledge,
in the cup,
some
and the scene
idea
is
or
set
plan,
for what should
or
be an
some
exciting
opportunity
semi-final. Who
which
will
would
make
not
it
have been
through?
available
It's
except through the
Manchester
change
City.
of thought
They
habits
take on
forced by the
Chelsea
adversity.
next on
Are those
EA
all the benefits
TV
available to
live.
human beings through failure?
No. Failure is used by nature as a common
The
language
stage is
in
set
which he
and the
chastises
players are
people
just
who
about
neglect to
ready
adapt
here
themselves
in
to
Manchester. We're at the home of City this evening.
The world
My name is
war
Derek
was
Ray, and
man-made.
with me for commentary is the former
Nature
Arsenal and
planted in the
England fullback
circumstances
Lee
of the
Dixon.
war the seed
And
of an
Manchester
equivalent
City know
reprimand
they
in the
must
form of
turn
war.
things around in the second and
depression was
decisive leg
inevitable.
of this Champions League
It followed
semi-final.
the war as
It is
naturally as
Manchester
day
City
follows night,
taking on
and by the operation
Chelsea.
of the self-same
Yeah, thanks,
law.
Derek. Chelsea
the
probably
law
just edged it after that first leg.
Am I to
Pretty good
understand
all-round
that the law
performance
of
from them.
hypnotic
Still a
rhythm
lot
is
of
the
work to
same
be
as
done,
that
though.
which Ralph
Small
Waldo
margins at
Emerson
this
called
level.
the law of
Should be a great
compensation?
game.
The law of hypnotic rhythm is the law of compensation. It is the power with which nature balances negative and positive forces throughout the universes, in all forms of energy, in all forms of matter, and in all human relationships.
Does the law of hypnotic rhythm operate quickly in all instances? For example, does this law immediately bless one with the benefits of positive application of thoughts, or curse one immediately with the results of negative thoughts?
The law operates definitely, but not always swiftly. Both the benefits and the penalties incurred through the law by individuals may be harvested by others, either before or
Here's the
after.
Manchester City lineup.
Observe
Well,
how
as a
this
team,
law
they do
works.
have their
By forcing
stylistic
upon one
preference, and it
generation of
really
people
is
the
all
effects of
about
both
trying to
sins
put the
and
opposition
virtues
under
of
pressure,
preceding
making sure that they
generations.
don't
In the
compose
operation
themselves.
of all of
Lee,
nature's
do you
laws,
expect to see
the
more of
fourth
that in this game?
Yeah, pretty much. They
Is an
love to press
inexorable
high,
factor.
don't they? It's
The
their
length
preferred
of
style
time
of play,
consumed
winning
by
the ball
nature in
high up the
relation
pitch.
of effects
It
to their
certainly
causes
benefits their
depends
strikers.
in every
They're very
instance
good at it.
on the circumstances at hand. Nature grows a pumpkin in 3 months. A good-sized oak tree requires 100 years. She converts a hen's egg into a chicken in 4 minutes, but she requires 9 months to convert the egg of a human being into an individual.
I now have a better understanding of the
And a look at
potentialities
the
of
Chelsea
adversity and
starting
failure.
11.
You may
Kepa
go ahead
is
now
given
with
the
your
green light
description
in
of the
goal.
next of the seven
Alexandra
principles.
plays with
What is
Joao
your next
Cancelo
principle?
in the fullback
The next
positions.
principle
N'Golo
is
Conte starts with
environmental
Koke on the flanks.
Go ahead and
The
describe the
tactical
working
configuration
principle of
has 2
environmental
players in
influence
attack
as a
from the very
determining factor in
outset.
human destinies.
And they
Environment
get the ball
consists of all
rolling
the
in the
mental,
second leg of
spiritual,
this
and physical
Champions League
forces which affect and
semi-final.
influence human beings.
What connection, if any, is there between environmental influences and hypnotic rhythm?
Hypnotic rhythm
Bruyne.
solidifies and makes permanent the thought habits of human beings. Thought habits are
Angelino.
stimulated by environmental influences. In other words, the material on which
he
thoughts
stopped
are
them just when
fed
they looked
comes from
menacing.
one's environment. Thought habits are made permanent by hypnotic rhythm.
And
What
now
is the
with
most important
Angelino.
part of one's environment?
Excellent
The
use of
part which
advantage from the
determines more
referee
than
in
all
City's
others
favour.
whether an individual makes
City free
positive
kick
or negative
forthcoming.
use of his mind?
The most important part of one's environment is that
Fired
created
from
by
the
his
flank
association
into the
with
area.
others.
An
All
opportunity
people
with the
absorb
header,
and take
but
over,
not
either
troubling the
consciously or
goalkeeper at all.
unconsciously,
Well, I
the
say
thought
one
habits of
thing,
those with whom
technique,
they
and he didn't have
associate
any.
closely.
Do you mean by this that constant association with a person whose thought habits are negative
He's given us
influences
away.
one to form negative thought habits?
Yes. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces every human being to form thought habits which harmonize with the dominating influences of his
Here's
environment,
Kovacic.
particularly that
Useful
part of his
looking
environment
ball.
created by his association with other lives.
Then it is important that one select
Thiago
one's
Silva's
close
block.
associates
The
with
fist
great
of the
care.
goalkeeper.
One's intimate associate should be chosen with as much care as one chooses the food with which he feeds his body, with the object always of associating with people whose dominating thoughts are positive, friendly, and harmonious.
Which class of associates has
Corner
the
kick
greatest
played in.
influence upon one?
One's partner in marriage and in the home,
And
and
the
one's
in the way.
associates in his occupation. After that come
Angelino.
close friends and acquaintances. Casual
He has
acquaintances
been
and
one of the
strangers
leading lights in the competition so far, Gabriel Jesus.
Why does one's
4 goals
partner
in
in
his last
marriage
3
have so
games.
great
He's
an
in
influence
superb
upon
form.
one's
He's
mind?
going to be really hard to
Because the
stop.
relationship
Defenders
of
need to be
marriage
on their
brings
game.
people under the influence of
Couldn't
spiritual
keep it.
forces of such weight that they become dominating
Eriksson.
forces of the
They
mind.
did have the ball, but not
How
anymore.
may environmental influences be used
He's
to
in
break the
danger of
grip of
giving it away.
hypnotic rhythm?
Just
All
wanted to get it out
influences
of there.
which establish thought habits are given permanency through
Bernardo
the law
Silva
of
has
hypnotic
it.
rhythm. One may change
the
the
clearance,
influences of his
half-hearted.
environment so that the dominating influences are either positive or negative. And the
Onto
law
it.
of hypnotic rhythm will make them
Conte.
permanent unless they are changed
Delightful
through
pass.
one's habits of
He
thought.
might profit from here,
Stating
you know.
this truth in
And it's
another
there for
way,
him.
one may submit himself to
There it
any
is,
environmental
and just the
influence
ideal
desired,
start.
whether positive or negative, and the law of hypnotic rhythm will make the influence permanent when it assumes the magnitude of thought habit. Is that the way the law works?
That is correct. Be careful of all forces which inspire thought.
Well, you could be
Those
critical
are
of
the
the
forces
defending,
which
but let's
constitute
focus on the great
environment
play.
and determine
Capped
the
off with
nature
a
of one's
superb,
earthly
calm,
destiny.
calculated finish.
What class of people controls their
So the
environmental
aggregate
influences?
advantage,
The
3-1.
non-drifters. All who are victims of the habit of drifting forfeit their power to choose their own environment. They become the victims of every
now with
negative influence of
Angelino.
their environment.
Is there no way out for the drifter? Is there no method by which he may submit himself to the influence of a positive environment?
And they continue
Yes,
to
there is a way out
advance.
for drifters.
And a lot of
They
options
can
here.
stop drifting, take possession of their own minds, and choose an environment which inspires positive thoughts.
Angelino.
This they
Gabriel
may
Jesus
accomplish
now.
through definiteness of
De Bruyne.
purpose.
Kevin
Is
De
that all
Bruyne
there is
could
to
keep
the act of
ball.
eliminating the habit of drifting? Is the habit only a state of mind?
Effective
Drifting
challenge.
is nothing but a negative state of mind, a state of mind conspicuous by its emptiness
now.
of purpose.
What effective procedure may
Using
one
his
follow
physical
in
strength
establishing
to
an
shield it.
environment most helpful in
Artur.
developing and maintaining
Conte.
positive thought habits?
Top class
The most
defending.
effective of all environments is that which may be created by a friendly alliance of a group of people who
And
will
using his
obligate
strength
themselves
to
to
shield
assist
the
one
ball.
another in achieving the object of some definite purpose.
Effective from
This
Eriksson.
sort of an alliance is known as a mastermind. Through its operation, one may associate himself with carefully chosen individuals,
Conte.
each of whom brings to
And
the alliance
Dembele.
some knowledge,
Now just couldn't
experience,
quite keep himself
education,
on
plan, or
side. The
idea
flag has gone up.
suited to his needs in carrying out the object of his definite purpose. The most successful leaders in all walks of life avail themselves of this sort of made-to-order environmental influence. Outstanding
Well, that's very
achievement is
smart
impossible
defending, and now
without
they
the
have the
friendly
ball again.
cooperation of others. Stating the truth in another way. Successful
Really
people
tidy
must
looking
control
attack,
their
continued
environment,
by
thereby
Eriksson.
ensuring themselves against the influence of a
Kovacic.
negative environment.
What of
Dembele.
people whose duty to relatives makes it impossible for them to avoid the influence of a
Sterling.
negative environment?
No human being owes another any degree of duty which robs him of his
A really
privilege of
committed
building his
challenge,
thought
and
habits
it's
in a
gone out for
positive
a throw-in.
environment. On the other hand, every human being is
Sterling has it.
duty-bound to himself to remove from his environment every influence
Bruyne.
which even remotely tends to develop negative thought habits.
Isn't this a cold-blooded philosophy?
Only the strong survive. No one
Keeping
can
the
be
ball
strong
moving.
without removing himself from all influences which develop negative thought habits.
Gabriel Jesus.
Negative thought habits result in the loss of the privilege of
Sterling has
self-determination, no matter what or who may cause those habits. Positive thought habits may be controlled by the individual and may serve his
Bruyne.
aims and purposes. Negative thought
The
habits
advantage is
control
with
the
City.
individual and
Somebody
deprive
can't
him
fault
of
them
the
for
privilege
trying
of
as they keep the
self-determination.
pressure on.
Well,
I deduce
speculative.
from all
Worth
you've
an
said
effort.
that those
2
who
goals
control
down,
the
why not?
environmental influences out of which their thought habits are built are masters of their earthly destinies, and that all others are mastered by earthly destinies. Is that stating the matter correctly?
Perfectly stated.
Conte.
But what establishes one's thought habits?
All habits are
Dembele.
established because of inherent or acquired desires
Koke.
or motives. That is,
Dembele.
habits are begun as the result of some
Joao
form of definite
Cancelo.
desire.
Really good
What takes
block.
place in the physical brain while one is forming thought habits?
Desires are organized impulses of energy, called
Corner kick
thoughts.
from Koke.
Desires that are mixed
Missed
with
on
emotional
ball.
feeling magnetize the brain cells in which they are
Blasted away.
stored and prepare those cells to be taken over and directed by the law of hypnotic rhythm. When any thought appears in the brain or is created there, and is mixed with
Conte.
keen emotional feeling of desire,
Akanji
the
has
law
it.
of hypnotic rhythm begins at once
Just
to
cutting off the
translate it into
supply.
its physical counterpart. dominating
be ideal for
thoughts,
the
which are
counter.
acted upon first by the law of hypnotic
Can
rhythm,
they take
are
advantage
those
of the
with which
situation?
are mixed the strongest desires and the most intense feelings.
Absolutely
Thought
nothing wrong
habits
with the
are established by the
counter-attack. Just a shame
repetition
about
of
the
the same
finish line.
thing.
But it just show you what they're
What are the
capable
most
of to hit
impelling
the team
basic
with pace
motives or
and power.
desires which
Just
inspire
lacked a
thought?
little bit of
The
composure
10
there.
most common motives,
found a pocket of
those which
space.
inspire most of one's physical action, are these. The desire for sex expression and love, the desire for physical food, the desire
Well,
for
that is how to
spiritual,
run at
mental, and physical
defenders.
self-expression, the desire
It's
for
an effective
perpetuation of
cross
life at
aimed
the
at the
ball,
back post.
the desire for
And he's
power
elected to
and
tip
others,
that over
the
for the
desire
corner.
for material wealth, the desire for knowledge, the desire to imitate others, the desire to excel
And
others,
firing it
the
into the
7
area.
basic fears.
Well, that's the end of that for now.
These are the dominating
Joao
motives which
Cancelo.
inspire the majority of all
N'Golo
human
Kanté.
endeavors.
What about the negative desires, such
Goodness,
as
he was
greed,
right on top of the
envy,
situation to
avarice,
get the ball
jealousy,
back for
anger?
his team.
Are these not expressed more often than any of the positive
And it
desires?
was turned
All
out.
negative
So
desires
a
are nothing
throw-in
but
will be
frustrations
next.
of positive desires. They are inspired by some form of defeat, failure, or neglect
to
by
it.
human beings to adapt themselves to nature's laws in a positive
Thiago
manner.
Silva knows
It's
a
a
thing
new
or two
slant
about
on the
blocking.
subject of negative thoughts.
Bernardo
If I
Silva.
correctly understand what
Gabriel
you've said,
Jesus.
all negative thoughts
ball
are
with
inspired
Rodri.
by one's neglect or failure to adapt oneself harmoniously to nature's laws. Is that correct?
That is exactly correct.
And scope.
Nature will not tolerate idleness or
Another shot from that position.
all
Left a bit
space
to be
must
desired.
and
Just
is
got to hit the
filled
target.
inside.
Let the power down a little bit and
Everything
go
in
for
existence,
accuracy.
of both a physical and a spiritual nature, must be
Kanté.
and is
It's
constantly
with
in
Joao
motion.
Cancelo.
The human brain is no exception. It was
Kanté
created
now.
to receive, organize, specialize, and express the power of
Dembele.
thought. When the individual does
Manoeuvring
not
his way
use the brain
forward.
for the expression of positive creative
Keeper did his
thoughts,
job to
nature
begin with.
fills the vacuum by forcing the brain to act upon negative thoughts. There can be no idleness in the brain.
Kanté.
Understand this principle,
Ederson,
and you will come into a
save.
new and important understanding of the part environmental influences take in the lives of human beings. You will better understand also how the law of
Koke.
hypnotic rhythm operates,
Dembele.
it being the law which keeps everything and everyone constantly moving through some
Well, that was a
form of
very
expression
fine read.
of either negative or positive principles.
Dembele. Kovacic.
Nature is not interested
Joao
in laws
Cancelo.
as such.
N'Golo
She is
Kanté
not
in the
interested
middle.
in right and wrong.
The goals
She is not
keep
interested
going
in
in
justice
for them.
and
I don't
injustice.
think they're going to throw
She is
this
interested
away now.
only in forcing everything to
Absolutely
express
omnipotent.
action according to its nature.
That is an enlightening interpretation of nature's ways. To whom may I
Well,
turn
sometimes
for
goals happen
cooperation
on the
at
training
your
ground
terms?
before
men
the
of
game.
science,
I'm sure
to
they
the
practice this.
philosophers, to
Great
all
movement, great
athletes.
cross, perfect goal.
Lastly, to the physical manifestations of nature
Chance to
herself.
revisit the goal.
Nature has no such thing as dead matter. Every atom of matter is constantly in a state of motion. All energy is constantly in motion. There are no dead voids anywhere. Time and space are literally manifestations of motion of such
Just to
swiftness
confirm the
that it cannot be
aggregate
measured by
situation,
human
4-1
beings.
is the score.
Alas, one is forced to the conclusion from what you say that the sources of dependable knowledge are shockingly limited.
The developed
It's with
sources of
Bernardo
knowledge
Silva.
are limited.
And
Every
now
normal
east
adult
side.
human brain is a
Thiago
potential
Silva.
gateway to all the knowledge there
De
is
Bruyne.
throughout the universes. Every normal adult brain has within its
Sterling.
mechanism the possibility of direct communication with infinite
Failed
intelligence,
to keep hold of it.
wherein exists all the knowledge that is or can ever be.
Your statement leads me to believe that human beings may become all they
Joao
have attributed to
Cancelo.
what they call
No
God.
nonsense
Is
clearance.
that what you mean?
Through the law of evolution, the human brain is being
Koke.
perfected to
He
communicate
has
at
been
will
deemed
with
to be
infinite
offside,
intelligence.
not by
The
much lead.
perfection will come through
brilliant
organized
officiating,
development
that
of the
is. Look at
brain,
that, spot
through
on.
its adaptation to nature's laws. Time
Given away
is the
by
factor
City.
which will bring perfection.
What
And the
causes
referee is
cycles
going to
of
add
recurring
on 3
events such
minutes.
as epidemics of disease, business
Kovacic.
depression, wars, and crime waves?
Danger
All
averted.
such epidemics in which
Kanté.
great numbers of people are similarly affected are caused by the law of hypnotic rhythm, through which nature
Bruyne.
consolidates thoughts of a similar nature and
Gabriel
causes those
Jesus.
thoughts to be expressed through mass action.
Then the Great Depression was put into motion because great numbers of people
Ball
were
with Rodri.
influenced to release thoughts of fear. Is that
Well, the
correct?
fans enjoyed that
Perfectly.
pass.
Millions of people were
He's an
endeavoring to
accurate
get something
cross.
for nothing through stock
It's
gambling.
got to be.
When they suddenly
And it's got
discovered
to
they
go.
had gotten nothing for something,
And so the
they
half-time
became
whistle is
frightened,
sounded here
rushed
in
to their
Manchester.
banks to draw out their balances, and the panic was on. Through mass thought of millions of minds, all thinking in terms of fear of poverty, the depression was prolonged over a period of years.
From what you say, I deduce that nature consolidates the dominating thoughts of people and expresses these thoughts through some form of mass action, such as business depressions, business booms, and so on. Is that correct?
You have the right idea.
Let us now take up the next of the 7 principles. Go ahead and describe it.
The next principle is time,
And they're
the
underway
fourth
in the
dimension.
second half.
What
of this
relationship is
Champions
there
League
between time and
semi-final
the
second
operation
leg?
of the law of hypnotic rhythm?
Time is the law of hypnotic rhythm. The lapse of time required to give permanency to thought habits depends
Koke
upon
with
the
it.
object and the nature of the thoughts.
Far from
But
a good
I
pass.
understood you to say that the only enduring thing in nature is change. If that is true, then time is constantly changing, rearranging, and
Eriksson.
recombining all things, including one's thought habits. How then could the law
It's
of
with
hypnotic
Bernardo
rhythm
Silva.
give permanency to one's thought habits?
And they've won
Time
possession again.
divides all thought habits into 2 classes, negative thoughts and
Well, let's see
positive
what they
thoughts.
have in store for them
One's
on the break.
individual thoughts are, of course, constantly
Dembele.
changing and being recombined to suit the individual's desires. But thoughts do
Still
not
alive.
change from negative to
He
positive,
got nothing
or
but
vice
ball.
versa,
He's
except
conceded
through
the corner.
voluntary effort on the part of the individual. Time penalizes the individual for all negative thoughts and rewards him
Koke
for all
tasked
positive
with
thoughts,
taking it.
according to the
Fist of
nature
the
and
goalkeeper.
purpose of the thoughts. If one's dominating
Header
thoughts
it
are
was, but
negative,
a pretty
time
straightforward
penalizes the
save.
individual
It's
by
an easy
building
header,
in his
Derek, and he
mind
made it
the
look really
habit of negative
difficult.
thinking, and then proceeds to solidify
We're
this
delighted
habit
to
into
say more
permanency
Premier League
every
action
second
coming
of
up
its
for you
existence.
here on EA
Positive
TV.
thoughts
It's
are
Manchester
likewise
City facing
woven by
Crystal
time
Palace.
into permanent
Has a go.
habits. The
And
term
he scored
permanency,
not
of
once,
course,
but twice.
refers to the
They
natural
simply
life of the
cannot
individual.
stop him, and no
In the strict
wonder
sense
he's
of the
enjoying
term,
himself.
nothing is permanent. Time converts thought habits into what might be called permanency during the life of the individual.
Then I have a better
Technique, when the ball
understanding.
comes to you, you don't need a touch, and you
What
can
are
just
those
whack it
characteristics
first
and
time like this.
connection
What's
with
he
the
got?
earthly destiny of human beings?
Time is nature's seasoning influence through which human experience may be ripened into wisdom. People are not born with wisdom, but they
Another
are born with
forced
the
error, you've got
capacity
to
to
say.
think, and they may, through the lapse of time, think their way into wisdom.
Do youths ever possess wisdom?
Dembele.
Only in
On the
very
dot he
elementary
goes.
matters.
And
Wisdom
space for
comes
the
only
cross.
through the lapse of
And it
time.
might be.
It cannot be inherited,
goal
and it cannot
after
be
goal
imparted from
after
one
goal.
person to another
Just no
except
end
through
to
the lapse
this.
of time.
A brilliant
Does the lapse
display.
of time force an individual to acquire wisdom?
No. Wisdom comes only to non-drifters who form positive thought habits as a dominating force in their lives. Drifters and those whose
Well, as we
dominating
can see,
thoughts
the
are
keeper's
negative
done his
never
best, but there's
acquire
nothing he
wisdom
can do from
except
there.
of a very
He's not going to miss
elementary
that
nature.
one.
From what you say, I infer that time
Let's
is
go
the
back to
friend
the
of the
goal and the
person who
score.
trains his mind to follow positive thought habits, and the enemy of the person who drifts into negative thought habits. Is that
Well, there's
correct?
nothing
That is
better for a
precisely
manager
true.
when a plan
All
comes
people
together.
can be
Total
classified as drifters
satisfaction.
and non-drifters. Drifters are always at the mercy of the non-drifters, and time makes this relationship permanent.
Do you mean that if I drift along through
So
life
the
without
aggregate score
definite
now,
aim or
6-1
purpose,
here.
the non-drifter may become my master, and time only serves to give the non-drifter a stronger and more permanent grip upon me?
That is stating
Ball
the
with
truth
Rodri.
exactly.
What is wisdom?
Wisdom is the ability to
And don't
relate
forget, we
yourself
have
to
more
nature's
Premier League
laws
action
so as to
coming
make
up
them
for you
simple,
on EA TV.
and the ability
It's
to relate
Chelsea
yourself to
facing
other people
Southampton.
so as to
Yeah,
gain their
really looking
harmonious
forward to
will
it.
and
Always a great
cooperation in
atmosphere in that
helping you to
stadium.
make
Should
life
be a
yield
really
whatever you
entertaining
demand of it.
match.
Then accumulated
Dembele.
knowledge is not wisdom.
Great
Can
heavens,
he take
no.
the chance?
If knowledge
And
were
that
wisdom, the
completes an
achievements of
impressive
science
hat-trick.
would not have been
keep
converted into
counting.
implements of
3 now,
destruction.
But at this rate,
What is
he's in for
needed
a
to
hatful.
convert knowledge into wisdom?
Time, plus the desire for wisdom. Wisdom is never thrust upon one. It is acquired, if at all, by positive thinking, through voluntary
Well,
effort.
he scored two.
Is it
He's
safe
gonna
for
get the
all
hat-trick
people
at
to
some
have
point,
knowledge?
you feel.
It is
He's
never
just
safe
so
for
full of
anyone to have
confidence. Never
exclusive
looked like
knowledge
this.
without wisdom.
Chance to
What is
revisit
the
the
age at
goal.
which most people who acquire wisdom begin to acquire it?
The majority of people who acquire wisdom do so after they
Well,
have passed
they've
the
been
age
poor
of
all
40.
day, Derek, and
Prior
your
to
sense
that
is going
time,
to
the
be a
majority
rollicking
of
in that
people are too
dressing room
busy
after the
gathering
game.
knowledge and organizing it into plans to spend any effort seeking wisdom.
What circumstance of life is
My
most
goodness,
apt to
it's
lead
so
one to acquire
one-sided.
wisdom?
Adversity
5-0 in this
and
match.
failure. These are nature's universal languages through which she imparts wisdom to those who are ready to receive it.
Do adversity and failure always bring wisdom?
And now
No,
he side.
only to those who are ready for wisdom
Eriksson.
and have voluntarily sought it.
Well, the back
What
pages and
determines
social
one's
media are
readiness to
chock
receive
full of
wisdom?
transfer
Time
rumours,
and
but
the
there
nature
does
of
appear
one's
to be
thought habits.
something behind
Is
this.
newly
Lee, what do you
acquired
make of it?
knowledge the same as
Well, Derek, there's
time-tested knowledge?
nothing like
No.
a transfer
Knowledge
rumour
tested
to liven
through
a
the lapse of
dressing room
time
up.
always
Puts a
is
spring in
superior
the
to that
step
which
of
has been
players,
newly acquired.
especially if you hear he plays in your
Time gives to
position.
knowledge definiteness in both quality and quantity, and dependability.
Dembele.
One can never be sure of
Dembele.
knowledge that has not been tested.
What is dependable knowledge?
It is knowledge
Giving
which
it away.
harmonizes with natural law, which means that it is based upon positive thought.
Does time modify
Excellent use
and
of the
alter the
ball as they
values
make
of
their way
knowledge?
forward.
Yes, time modifies and alters all values. That which is accurate
He's enjoying
knowledge today
space.
may become null and void tomorrow because
in
of
the
time's
centre.
rearrangement of
It's
facts
driven
and
in low.
values.
The
Time
goalkeeper,
modifies all
relatively
human
untroubled.
relationships for
Yeah,
better
he's
or
not
for
gonna let
worse,
that one in,
depending
Derek.
upon the policy through which people relate themselves to one another. In the realm of thought, there is a time when it is
The ball
proper
with
to sow the
Rodri.
seeds of thought,
An
and there
important
is a proper
interception.
time to reap the harvest of those thoughts. The same as there is a time to sow and a time
Bailey.
to reap from the soil of life.
Alexandro.
Without
The
the
cross
proper
is on.
measurement of time between the sowing and the reaping, nature modifies or withholds the rewards of the sower.
Keeping possession of the ball with
Go ahead now
authority.
and describe the last two of the 7 principles.
The next principle is
It
harmony.
should be.
Throughout nature, one may find evidences that all
he
natural
succeeds in
law moves in
striking
an
us off the
orderly
line.
manner through the law of harmony. Through the operation of
Manchester
this
City will
law,
go
nature
to their
forces
bench.
everything within the range of a given environment to
Conte.
become harmoniously related.
Dembele.
Understand this
And
truth,
return to
and you will
Conte.
catch a
A
new and a
wonderful
more
intervention.
intriguing vision of the power
Just
of
wanted to
environment.
get it out of
You will
there.
understand why association with negative minds
Conte.
is fatal to those seeking
Opportunity to
self-determination.
deliver the cross.
Do you mean that nature voluntarily forces
the ball
human
back.
beings to harmonize
And
with
shoots.
the influences of their environment?
Yes, that is true. The law of hypnotic rhythm forces upon every living thing the dominating influences of the environment in which it exists.
If nature forces human beings to take on the nature of the environment in which they live, what means of escape are available to people who find themselves in an environment of poverty and failure, but
They have
desire
come
to
up with a
escape?
goal.
They
Well,
must
it's crumbled.
change their
Defence crumbled
environment
in front of
or
their
remain
eyes.
poverty-stricken. Nature permits no one to escape the influences of his environment. However, nature, in her abundance of wisdom, has given to every normal human being the privilege of establishing his own mental, spiritual, and physical environment. But once he establishes it, he must become a part of it. This is the inexorable working of the law of
And it's an
harmony.
out-and-out pace.
In a
Equals
business
6-0.
association, for example, who establishes
20
the
minutes to go.
dominating influence that determines the rhythm of the environment?
The individual or individuals who think and act with definiteness of purpose.
Is it as simple as that?
Yes.
Sterling has
Definiteness
it.
of purpose is the starting point from which an
Clean as a
individual may
whistle, that
establish his own environment.
You do not seem to follow your reasoning.
Leandro
The entire
Cabrera.
world is torn
Good
with
pressure. Can they
warfare,
make something of
business
this?
depressions, and other forms of strife which
Sterling has
represent
it.
about everything except harmony. Nature does not seem to be forcing
A
people
City
to
corner
harmonize
it
with
is.
one another.
Manchester
How do you
City
explain this
coming off the pitch.
A
inconsistency?
change in the offing
There
for
is no
City.
inconsistency.
And now
The
the
dominating
delivery.
influences of the world are,
Side
as
by
you say,
side.
negative.
Coming onto
Very
the
well.
pitch.
Nature
Over
is
the
forcing
touchline
human
for a
beings to
throw-in.
harmonize with the dominating influences of the world
And number
environment.
19, Leroy Sané.
Manifestations of
Arthur has
harmony may
it.
be either
It's with
positive
Joao
or negative.
Cancelo.
For example, a group of men in
to
prison
be
may,
a
and
throw-in.
they generally do, think and act in a negative manner. But nature sees to it that the dominating influence of the
Cabrera.
prison is impressed upon
Conte.
every individual in it. A group
Koke.
of poverty-stricken people in a
providing
tenement
width.
house may fight among themselves and
Conte.
apparently resist all forms of harmony. But nature
As an attacking
forces
player,
each of them
you
to
rather
become a
hope
part
you'll
of the
get the
dominating
decision in your
influence of the
favour, but
house in which they
offside
live.
here.
Yeah, the defence got that spot
Harmony,
on, and so did
in
the
the sense it
linesman.
is here used, means that nature relates everything throughout the universe as to every
Arthur has
other
it.
thing of a similar nature.
Well, that's
Negative
up.
influences are forced into association with
Well,
one
that's
another,
very smart
no matter where
defending,
they
and
may
now they
be.
have the ball again.
Positive influences are just as definitely forced into association with one another.
And now
I'm
with
beginning to see why
Angelino.
successful business leaders are so careful in the choice of their business associates. Men who succeed in
Leandro
any field
Cabrera.
usually establish
Possession
their
one.
own environment by surrounding
Reina.
themselves with people who think
back
and
with
act in
Sané.
terms of success. Is that the idea?
That is the idea exactly.
Interception by
Observe
Eriksson,
with
winning it
profit
back
that
for
the
his
one
team.
thing all successful men insist upon is harmony among their business associates.
Arthur has it.
Another trait of successful
Conte
people
now.
is that they move with
Morata.
definiteness of purpose and
And
insist
return
upon
to
their
Conte.
associates
Delightful
doing the same.
pass.
Understand these
might
two
have been
truths,
onside,
and you
but he
understand
was
the
just a
major
fraction
difference
off.
between a
Oh, I'm
Henry
not so
Ford
sure.
and
I'd like
a
to
David.
see that again.
Now, tell me about the last
10
of the
minutes
7
left for
principles.
play in this match.
The last principle is caution. Next to the habit of drifting, the most dangerous human trait is the lack of caution.
Just couldn't keep the
People
ball.
drift into all sorts of hazardous circumstances
Well,
because they
that's
do
a
not
splendid
exercise
piece of
caution by
challenging.
planning the moves they
Quick
make.
thinking to
The drifter
dispossess his
always
opponents.
moves without exercising caution. He acts first and thinks later, if at all. He does not choose his friends. He drifts along and allows people to attach themselves to him on their own terms. He does not choose an occupation. He drifts through school and is glad to get the
Substitution time it
first
is.
job that will give him food and clothing. He invites
Reiner.
people to cheat him at trade by neglecting to
Eriksson.
inform himself of the rules of trade. He
Eriksson.
invites illness by neglecting to inform
N'Golo
himself of the
Kante.
rules of
That's
sound
what he
health.
does.
He invites
Might well be
poverty
scope for
by
them to
neglecting to protect
counter-attack
himself
here.
against the environmental
They need to get
influences of the
bodies back.
poverty-stricken. He invites
Morata.
failure at every step he takes by
Crossing
neglecting to
possibilities.
exercise the caution to observe what causes people to fail.
He
He
succeeds in
invites
clearing
fear
it.
in all its forms by his lack of caution in examining the causes of fear.
Thiago
He
Silva.
fails in marriage
Well, Derek,
because he
if you don't
neglects to
close
use
down,
caution in
you
his
don't
choice
work
of a
hard
mate.
without the ball,
And he
you don't
uses
put a
still less
shift in,
caution
you
in
end
his
up with a
methods of
performance
relating
in an
himself to
atmosphere
her
like
after
this.
marriage.
The fans are
He
not
loses
very
his
happy at
friends
all.
or
Been
converts them
poor
into
today.
enemies by his lack of caution in
Conte.
relating himself to them on the proper basis.
Morata.
Are all people lacking in caution?
Manuel Akanji.
Only those who have acquired the habit of drifting. The non-drifter
Morata.
always uses caution. He carefully
Running with
thinks
the
his
ball
plans through
confidently.
before he begins them. He makes allowances
It's
for the
driven in
human
low.
frailties of his associates and plans ahead to bridge them. If he sends a messenger on an important mission, he sends someone else to make sure the
Artur.
messenger does not neglect his mission. Then he checks on both of them to be sure his wishes have been
A
fulfilled.
Chelsea corner.
He takes nothing for granted, where caution provides a way to ensure his success.
Isn't over-caution as
Played into the
detrimental as
centre of the
lack of
box.
caution?
There is no such thing as over-caution. What you call
referee has
over-caution is an
indicated-
The counter
expression of
looks on
fear.
here. Options
Fear and
available.
caution are two entirely different things.
Don't people mistake fear for over-caution?
Manoeuvring
Yes,
his way
that does
forward.
sometimes happen.
Well, it came
But the
the keeper
majority of
making
people
sure
create
that
for
there were no
themselves far
straps
more
to feed
disastrous
on for the
hazard by
attackers.
total lack of the habit of caution than by over-caution.
In what way may caution be used most advantageously?
De
In the
Bruyne.
selection of one's
Aguero.
associates and in one's method of relating
De Bruyne.
oneself to
And now
associates.
Sterling.
The reason
A
for
wonderful
this is
intervention.
obvious. One's associates constitute the most important part of one's environment, and environmental influences determine whether
And
one
there it
forms the
is. The
habit of
referee
drifting.
blows for
Or
full
becomes
time.
a
And
non-drifter.
Chelsea ascend
The
to the
person who
final.
exercises
Well,
due
because of
caution in the
what's
choice
at
of
stake,
associates
i.e. a
never
final,
allows himself to
semi-finals
be
can be a bit
closely
nervy at
associated with
times.
any person who does not bring to him,
Dembele.
through the association,
Kovacic.
some definite mental, spiritual, or economic benefit.
Isn't that method of choosing associates selfish?
It is sensible and leads to self-determination. It is the desire of every normal person to find material success and happiness. Nothing contributes more to one's success and happiness than carefully chosen associates. Caution in the selection of associates becomes, therefore, the duty of every person who wishes to become happy and successful. The drifter allows his closest associates to attach themselves to him on their own terms. The non-drifter carefully selects his associates and allows
Just a
no
minute,
one to
time.
become closely associated with him unless that person contributes some form of helpful influence or bestows some definite benefit.
It never occurred to me that caution in the selection of friends had so definite a bearing on one's success or failure. Do all successful people exercise caution in the selection of all their associates, whether in business, social, or professional relationships?
Thank
Without
you.
the exercise of caution in the choice of all associates, no one may be certain of success in any calling. On the other hand, lack of exercise of caution brings almost certain defeat in whatever one undertakes.
Summary. 3 things connected with my interview with the devil interest me most. These 3 factors interest me because they have been the most important influences in my own life, a fact which any listener of my story can easily discern. The 3 important factors are the habit of drifting, the law of hypnotic rhythm through which all habits are made permanent, and the element of time. Here is a trio of forces which hold inviolate the destinies of all men. The 3 take on a new and more important meaning when they are grouped and studied as a combined force. It takes but little imagination and scarcely any understanding of natural laws for one to see that most of the difficulties in which people find themselves are of their own making. Moreover, difficulties seldom are the outgrowth of immediate circumstances. They are generally the climax of a series of circumstances which have been consolidated through the habit of drifting and with the aid of time. Samuel Insull did not lose his $4 billion industrial empire as the result of the Depression. He began losing it long before the Depression, when he became the victim of a group of women who flattered him into turning his talents from public utilities to grand opera. If ever a man in a high position in the financial world went down because of the power of drifting, hypnotic rhythm, and time, that man was Samuel Insull. I am writing from accurate knowledge of Mr. Insull and the cause of his troubles dating from the time that I served with him during the World War to the time of his ill-advised attempt to run away from himself. Henry Ford went through the same depression that swept Mr. Insull under, but Ford came out on top without a scratch. Do you want to know the reason? I'll tell you. Ford has the habit of not drifting on any subject. Time is Ford's friend, because he has formed the habit of using it in a positive, constructive manner, with the aid of thoughts of his own making, woven into plans of his own creation. Take any circumstance you wish, measure it with reference to its relationship to the habit of drifting, hypnotic rhythm, and time, and you may ascertain accurately the cause of all success and all failure. Franklin D. Roosevelt went into office with a bang during his first term. He had but one major purpose in mind, and that was very definite. It was to stop the stampede of fear and start people to thinking and talking in terms of business recovery instead of business depression. In carrying out that purpose, there was no drifting. The forces of the entire nation were consolidated and moved as one to help carry out the President's definite purpose. For the first time in the history of America, the newspapers of all political leanings, the churches of all denominations, the people of all races and colors, and the political organizations of all brands united themselves into one stupendous power for the sole purpose of helping the President restore faith and normal business relationships in the country. In a conference held between the President and a group of emergency advisors a few days after he went into office, I asked him what was his major problem. He replied, "It is not a question of majors and minors. We have but one problem, and that is to stop fear and supplant it with faith." Before the end of his first year in office, the President had stopped fear and supplanted it by faith, and the nation was slowly but surely on the way out of the jungle of depression. By the end of his first term, mark well the element of lapse of time, the President had so effectively consolidated the forces of American business and private life that he had an entire nation in back of him, ready, willing, and enthusiastically desirous of following his lead, no matter which way he went. These are facts well known to everyone who reads newspapers or listens to the radio. Then came another presidential election and the opportunity for the people to express their faith in their leader. They expressed it in a landslide without precedent in American politics, and the President went into office a second time with an almost unanimous electorate vote, with only 2 states meekly dissenting. Now observe how the wheel of life began to reverse itself and turn back in the other direction. The President changed his policy from definiteness of purpose to indefiniteness and drifting. His change of policy split the powerful labor group and turned more than half of it against him. It split the almost solid following he held in both houses of Congress, and more important than all this, it split the American people into pro- and anti-groups, with the result that about all the President had left of his original political assets was his $1 million smile and his ready handshake, obviously not enough to enable him to regain the power he once wielded in American life. Here, then, we have an excellent example of a man who skyrocketed to great power through definiteness of purpose and belly flop to the starting point by his habit of drifting. In both his rise and his fall can be seen clearly the operation of the principles of drifting and non-drifting reaching a climax through the power of hypnotic rhythm and time. All my life, the devil had a dramatic story to tell of his dealings with me. He saw me drift in and out of scores of business opportunities for which many would have given a king's ransom. He saw me drifting in my policy of relating myself to others, particularly in my lack of caution in business dealings. The circumstance which saved me from fatal control of the law of hypnotic rhythm was the definiteness of purpose with which, at long last, I dedicated my entire life to the organization of a philosophy of individual achievement. I drifted at one time or another on all my minor whims and endeavors, but my drifting was offset by my major purpose, which was sufficient to restore my courage and start me once more in the quest of knowledge every time I was defeated in connection with my minor aims. I learned something of the hazardous nature of the habit of drifting while engaged in analyzing more than 25,000 people in connection with the organization of the law of success. These analyses showed that only 2 out of every 100 have a definite major aim in life. The other 98 were caught by the habit of drifting. It seems more than a coincidence that my analyses clearly corroborated the devil's claim that he controls 98 out of every 100 people because of their habit of drifting. Looking back over my own career, I can see clearly that I could have avoided the majority of the temporary defeats with which I met if I had been definitely following a plan for the attainment of my major purpose in life. From my experience in having analyzed the problems of more than 5,000 families, I know definitely that the majority of married people who get out of harmony with each other do so because of the accumulation of a great number of little circumstances in their married relationship, which could have been cleared up and disposed of as they arose if there had been a definite policy to do so. They do not live their married life with definiteness of purpose. So the story has gone, all back down the ages. The man with the most definite plan and purpose and the most power rides on to victory. The others scurry for cover and get crushed under the heels of those who are more determined. The answer is not hard to find. There is no use looking toward high heaven for it. For my part, I would prefer to seek the answer from the devil, for he would tell me quickly enough that victory goes to the people who know what they want and are determined to have it. They have mastered the habit of drifting. They have definite policies, definite plans, and definite objectives. Their opposition, which may outnumber them very greatly, has no chance against them, because the opposition has no plan, no purpose, no policy, except that of drifting along, hoping that something may turn up to help them. In those 3 brief sentences, you have the sum and the substance of the difference between success and failure, power and lack of it. We come now near to the end of our visit through this book. If we were to try to state in one brief sentence the most important part of that which I have tried to convey through the book, it would be something like this. One's dominating desires can be crystallized into their physical equivalents through definiteness of purpose backed by definiteness of plans, with the aid of nature's law of hypnotic rhythm and time. There you have the positive phase of the philosophy of individual achievement I've tried to describe through this book, brought down to an irreducible minimum of brevity and simplicity. If you expand the philosophy for the purpose of adapting it to the circumstances of life, you find that it is as broad as life itself, that it covers all human relationships, all human thoughts, aims, and desires. So here we are, at the end of the strangest of all the thousands of interviews I have had with the great and the near great, over a period of 50 years of labor, in my search for the truths of life that lead to happiness and economic security. How strange indeed that after having had active cooperation from men such as Carnegie, Edison, and Ford, I should have been compelled, finally, to go to the devil for a working knowledge of the greatest of all the principles uncovered in my quest for truth. How strange that I was forced to experience poverty and failure and adversity in 100 forms before being given the privilege of understanding and using a law of nature which softens the thrust of these wicked weapons or wipes them out altogether. But the strangest of all this dramatic experience which life has provided me is the simplicity of the law through which, if I had understood it, I could have transmuted my desires into substantial form without having to undergo so many years of hardship and misery. I find now, at the end of my interview with the devil, that I had been carrying in my own pockets the matches with which the fires of adversity were being touched off. And I find, too, that the water with which those fires were finally extinguished was at my command in great abundance. I searched for the philosopher's lodestone with which failure may be converted into success, only to learn that both success and failure are the results of day-to-day evolutionary forces through which dominating thoughts are pieced together bit by bit and woven into the things we want or the things we do not want, according to the nature of those thoughts. How unfortunate that I did not understand this truth from the time that I reached the age of reason, for if I had understood it then, I might have been able to go around some of the hurdles I've been forced to jump as I walked through the valley of the shadow of life. The story of my interview with the devil is now in your hands. The benefits you will receive from it will be